Mr. Hart, you're now live.
Thank you, Debbie. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Hart, and I'm the chair of the Toronto Police Services Board. Welcome to this virtual meeting of our board. Although this meeting is taking place on the phone, we acknowledge that the land we're on as we make this call is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The board also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties, signed by multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Do we have any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Hearing none, I'll move on. I'll now turn this meeting over to the board's executive director, Mr. Ryan Teschner, who will go over the meeting's logistics. Ryan?
Thank you, Chair Hart, and thank you to everyone who has joined this meeting. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed on the Toronto Police YouTube account and will be available there for everyone after the conclusion of this meeting. On the line right now, we have Chair Jim Hart, Vice Chair Marie Molinar, Councillor Michael Ford, Councillor Francis Nunziata, Member Ainsworth Morgan, Member Lisa Kitstakis, and Mayor Tory will be joining us shortly. We also have members of our board staff on the line. As well, we have Chief Raymer, his command team, and other members of the service that will join us throughout the meeting by WebEx. And of course, welcome to all members of the public. We have individuals who have registered to make deputations on our agenda items. As per our regular meeting process, deputations will be heard prior to the item being discussed and voted on by board members. When it comes time to do a deputation, those who have registered will be brought into the call by our colleague, Du Buchanan-Gisser. As always, deputants will speak, followed by an opportunity for board members to ask them questions. Mr. Chair, I'll turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Teschner. We'll now go through the agenda. Item number 1 on the agenda is a confirmation of the minutes from the virtual meeting held on September the 17th, 2020. Can someone move those minutes, please? Councillor Nunziata, can I have a seconder? I can't see everyone. I can see Councillor Nunziata and Councillor Ford seconds that. Thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? That item carries. Item number 2 is Toronto gang prevention, what we learned and where we're going. We have a presentation on item number 2 as well as a deputant, so that item is held down. Item number 3 is police reform implementation dashboard. That's a presentation, and as well we have a deputant, so item number 3 is held down. Item number 4 is the status of the Auditor General's proposed risk-based audit plan for the Toronto Police Service. We have a deputation on that item, so item number 4 is held down. Item number 5 is Chief of Police selection process, contract award to Environics to deliver public consultation services. We have a deputation on item number 5. Item number 5 is held down. Item number 6, Global Search Solution Project, contract increase for additional licensing and professional services, Michael Sismer and Associates. And I have a motion to approve item number 6.
Chair,
Ford, Yep.
I'm sorry, my sound, thank you. My sound is very bad. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Ms. Molinar.
I would like to hold down the items that are related to the technology investment 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, I believe. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. So item number 6, which is Global Search Solution Project contract increase for additional licensing and professional services, Michael Sismer and Associates, is held down by the Vice Chair. Item number 7, which is contract award for Adobe software maintenance and support, Softchoice Canada Incorporated, is held down by the Vice Chair. Item number 8, contract award for the supply of Panasonic CF33 ruggedized mobile workstations, associated accessories and maintenance, Softchoice Canada Incorporated, is held down by the Vice Chair. Item number 9, which is contract award for integrated telecommunication infrastructure of Bell Canada, is held down by the Vice Chair. Item number 10, which is contract award for the supply of vehicle equipment installation services for Industries Limited, is held down by the Vice Chair. Item number 11, which is a contract award to supply Havas mounting equipment for vehicle electronic systems, Mega Technical Holdings Limited, is held down by the Vice Chair. Item number 12 is City of Toronto Traffic Agent Special Constable Appointments, October 2020. And I have a motion to approve item number 12. Councillor Ford, seconded by Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, item number 12 carries. Item number 13, Special Constable Appointments and Reappointments, October 2020. Can I have a motion to approve item 13? Councillor Ford, seconded by Ms. Kostakis. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, item 13 carries. Item number 14, Request for Special Funds, Ontario Association of Police Services Boards 2020 Virtual Labor Seminar. Can I have a motion to approve item number 14? Councillor Nunziata. Can I have a seconder? Ms. Kostakis. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Just for board members' information, on my screen I can see Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Ford, Ms. Kostakis. I can't see anyone else, so if you're not one of those three and you want to hold something, please shout out. Thank you. Item number 15 is Toronto Police Service Board's race-based data collection, analysis, and public reporting policy community engagement report. That item is being held down for presentation. Item number 16 is Toronto Police Service Board's Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit progress update on the unit's work, held down also for deputation. Item number 17, Toronto Police Service Open Data and Open Analytics. Can I have a motion to receive item number 17? Councillor Nunziata. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Ford. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, item 17 carries. Item number 18, which is the Toronto Police Service Board Special Fund Annual Specified Procedures Report for the year ended December 31st, 2019. Can I have a motion to receive item number 18? Ms. Kostakis, seconder Councillor Ford. All in favor? That item carries. Item number 19, operating budget variance for the Toronto Police Service Board period ending June 30th, 2020. Can I have a motion to approve item number 19? Councillor Nunziata, can I have a seconder? Councillor Ford, all in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, item number 19 carries. Item number 20, which is our last item, Chief Administrative Investigation into the Custody Injury to Complainant 2019-06. Can I have a motion to receive item number 20? Motion to receive, Ms. Kostakis, the seconder, Councillor Ford, all in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, item number 20 carries. I will now walk us through the items that have been held for everyone's information. Item number 2 is held. Item number 3 is held. Item number 4, item number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 15, and 16. So we will now, board members and anyone watching and listening, we will return to the top of the agenda, which is item number 2, which is Toronto Gang Prevention, what we learned and where we're going. We will hear the presentation first, and then we'll hear from our deputant. So for the presentation, Chief, I'll turn it over to you, and I understand Detective Constable Ron Chhinzer will be doing the presentation, but I'll turn it over to the service. Start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Our gang prevention initiative is something that I started in our command several years ago with the intent really of doing something different. And it was, we really wanted to see our officers involved on the investigative side of the house getting involved on the prevention side. And we really need to work collaboratively with our service partners and community members to break that cycle of violence. And I'm very pleased to see how this program has evolved over the last few years, particularly under the guidance of Ron Chhinzer and Jason Kondo, who oversee the program. But what I'll do is I'll just turn it over to Deputy Demke there for a brief introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Everyone. Gun and gang violence is certainly a priority for the Toronto Police, and we recognize it requires a multidimensional approach to deal with gun and gang violence. We recognize that we cannot arrest our way through the challenges that gun and gang violence poses. It requires a collaborative approach, both on a systemic level and on an operational level. What that means is we need to work alongside our community members to make their spaces safe, while working with social service providers to address systemic issues that lead people down the path towards gang life. It means listening and understanding what new approaches can be effective to assist communities, families, and in particular, vulnerable people. Project Engage 416 is a great example of that. We have listened and learned about different ways that police can contribute to better outcomes as it relates to gun and gang violence. And now I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Detective Constable Ron Chhinzer, seated to my left, who's a member of our Integrated Gang Prevention Task Force, who will explain what we've learned and explain the Toronto Police Gang Prevention Program.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Deputy, for the introduction, as well as the opportunity to allow us, as part of the Integrated Gang Prevention Task Force, to really dive deep and explore this issue on a scale and level that has never been explored at any extent all over the world. Who I do have with us today is Mr. Rico King. He has deep roots in the southern states of the United States, specifically being Houston as well as Baltimore. He comes from a very gang-impacted upbringing and lifestyle, but most importantly, he did something about it. By twist of fate, we connected at the very early onset of our development of the Integrated Gang Prevention Task Force and Toronto's gang strategy. And Rico has been a great advisor and counsel as somebody with both lived experience, as both coming from a gang environment, as well as somebody who really changed not only one city, but two major cities in the United States, one of which being the highest postal code homicide rate in North America. So this time, Rico, thank you.
Hello, thank you for the introduction, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I came to Toronto to add value and to the situation that's going on over here, and I learned a lot with Ron. I feel like Toronto is in great hands. And the solution for this problem comes from the community. And that's how I've felt the whole time. And that's my approach in Houston and Baltimore. And joining the Gang Prevention Task Force was a great experience because I saw that in the flesh. And I think Toronto is mostly in great hands because it's a everybody problem. It's a Toronto problem. It's not just community problem for this certain spot. So I really appreciate being here, and I'm hopeful for the future and to keep working with the Gang Prevention Task Force.
Thank you, Rico. It's difficult to wrap up 4 years in 13 to 14 minutes, but at this point here, I'd like to introduce a video which does wrap up and summarizes the last 4 years in 13 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, my ex-husband got shot here in front of my kids. Literally lived in fear. The other day there was like shootings at other neighborhoods or something. I'm at home, you know, but I know I can see the pattern here. The other day when there was a lot of shootings, I got scared and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on, but I told my kids to get the hell in the house.
I'm sorry to hear that. When we come back, you're definitely somebody we're going to stay in touch with because I want you to know that we're here. I wish that was an isolated experience. However, over the last 4 years, our experience in dealing with thousands of community members and families from the lowest equitable neighborhoods in the city of Toronto is that this is an issue that has been happening for decades. But how we got there, how we got to knocking on people's doors, is a story of itself. In December of 2016, then Deputy Chief, but current Interim Chief, Jim Raymer, posed the problem statement, how do we get a gang member out of a gang? That statement was assigned to Detective Jason Kondo and I of the Integrated Gun and Gang Task Force, in which we founded the Integrated Gang Prevention Task Force. And when you have a problem statement like that, there are a lot of conventional wisdom ideas on how you attack it. Engage the youth, engage the families, heighten law enforcement, and they all work individually. However, the true question became, how do we solve this exact specific problem? And over the course of the last 4 years, we have ran several projects, engaged thousands of community members and family members and impacted stakeholders to find a solution. And in the primary stages of our research and development, we had first spoke to other law enforcement professionals to gather their perspectives and insights. We then expanded out and benchmarked ourselves with every other major city across the world that had the same or similar diversity as the City of Toronto. And we'd conducted extensive academic and evidence-based research to find a single solution. And during our preliminary research, consultations, and practices, we had discovered that no single agency, whether you're law enforcement, social services, or any other impacted entity, had a successful and replicatable way of effectively getting a gang member out of a gang. But none of those experiences went to waste. In fact, our scope and our perspective on how deep and wide this issue is grew with more of the consultation, the engagement, and the research that we conducted. And our focus grew on not just combating gang violence, but also being aware of the 36 individual risk factors that occur over 5 stages of life from the age of 0 to 18 that create gang members. And being aware of the 36 individual risk factors allows us an opportunity to combat the risk factors with protective mitigating factors on 5 different categories of life, being in your family, in your school, within your peer group, within you as an individual, and lastly, within the community that you live in. However, prior to engaging in any sort of prevention, intervention, and outreach strategies, public safety has to be at the forefront. The other aspect outside of gang recruitment and membership and the risk factors is the gang violence that gets committed on a daily basis in Toronto's most impacted neighborhoods. And those impacts go deeper than the single layer of what we see on TV, what the news articles say, and the tidbits on social media. The impacts of gang crimes on the secondary level are the economic and opportunity impacts. And as we continue to make efforts and strategies and projects to attack this problem, we had adopted a modified, comprehensive gang model to incorporate into the City of Toronto. And one of the primary pieces of the implementation model included contacting and engaging impacted stakeholders, beginning with government and non-government agencies. And over the course of a year, we pursued those relationships on a horizontal level as well as a vertical level. The horizontal level was consulting with municipal services, social agencies, and entities which were meant to serve the residents of the City of Toronto. The vertical level included provincial and federal government involvement. And as we gained an understanding of each of their individual perspectives, their impacts, their opportunities, we started to realize that this problem is a very significant problem that has horrible results. And as we continued to have high-level meetings with different branches of government, different social agencies, and different entities that were focused on resolving issues like this, we had a realization. And that realization was the group that was never represented, never included, was the communities that are impacted the most, including gang members, their families, victims of gang violence, and the communities in which they reside. So between September of 2019 and March of 2020, we aimed to host 31 gang prevention town halls in 31 of Toronto's lowest equitable neighborhoods with the intent on engaging an impacted community, teaching them our framework, and having them fill in the gaps with where they needed to be serviced at a root level. As a result of COVID, we managed to complete 30 of the gang prevention town halls in which we spoke to over 1,600 participants, as well as 75 government and non-government organizations. The participants ranged from gang members, ex-gang members, human trafficking survivors, families of gang members, families of victims of gang violence, and victims of gang violence. And over the course of our 30 gang prevention town halls, we gained a tremendous insight and perspective of the problem from the most valuable lens, the inside out. We administered surveys to gather an understanding of what the community is seeing on their end. When we'd surveyed community members to determine what are their top 3 priorities or concerns in their neighborhood, the responses were robbery, drug use and activity, and gang activity. When the community members were asked what they felt like was a contributing factor, their top 3 answers were poverty, lack of activities, and family problems. When they were asked what notable strategies could be included to help combat their concerns, their top 3 answers were mentoring, community programs, and job placements. And when the community was asked, what were you willing to do to help solve this problem? What they offered up in their top 3 was mentoring, teaching job skills, and conducting neighborhood outreach. And in December of 2019, the midway point of our gang prevention town halls, we developed Project #Engage416, which was heavily motivated and driven by the voices of the community, the needs of the community, and where we saw opportunity. Project #Engage416 has many capacities and many arms, but they're best split up into 4 categories: education, prevention, intervention, and suppression. Education being learning and sharing back what we've learned from everybody, including our impacted stakeholders, our academic partners, evidence-based strategies, other like-minded organizations, and most importantly, what we've learned from the community in which we serve. Under the prevention pillar, there are 2 focuses. The primary focus is on youth between the ages of 0 to 12 that have identifiable risk factors with no protective or mitigating factors, and the secondary being communities as a whole. I'm talking about the most impacted communities from gun and gang violence, human trafficking, and sexual assault and harassment. Within the intervention pillar, the target population are youth between the ages of 12 to 17 that are currently criminally involved in the justice system. Those are the ones that are participating in gang activity, conducting human trafficking, or involved in sexual assault and harassment. We need to aggressively engage them to identify their individual risk factors and connect them with much needed social services. And the final pillar is suppression. For any intervention or prevention efforts to work their best, the community, the neighborhood, and the city needs to be safe. There needs to be a blanket sense of safety that for me to engage in any services, there's no repercussion. I'm not going to get hurt. Nobody that I know is going to get hurt, and there's not going to be threats on my life or safety. And for that to happen effectively, there needs to be an understanding that while at the same time, we can work with youth and their families to strengthen them to create maximum success, that there is a portion of the population that consistently victimizes the rest of the community. And as long as that population is free to do what they want, to terrorize community members, to commit brazen shootings, to conduct drug dealing and activity, to recruit young females into human trafficking, and to recruit young at-risk children into the gang lifestyle, none of those strategies will work. Project #Engage416 members are conducting intensive and aggressive outreach in these 12 identified pocket neighborhoods in Toronto's Northwest Quadrant with the intent of developing a neighborhood team consisting of not only community members and members of the Toronto Police Service, but social service agencies within their community that also need a voice. This is about truly giving community members that are often neglected, that are the most impacted by gun and gang violence, human trafficking, and sexual assault and harassment, a true voice in driving strategies and initiatives for real-world solutions where they need it the most. One of our many aims is to really impact the communities and neighborhoods positively by truly empowering them, not providing them every solution, but hearing where the solutions could be applied, teaching them and giving them the skills to apply it, and supporting them along the way. And while I haven't been asked this specifically, I'd like to share you a controversial lens. The controversial lens is attaching a dollar amount to prevention and intervention efforts. There are estimates on a conservative level that a homicide costs $5 to $6 million of taxpayer money. Some other liberal estimates put it at $15 to $16 million. And the reason isn't just the application of justice or policing or the court system. It takes into account the economic impacts of gang crimes throughout an entire city and country. What happens to property value? What happens to job loss? What happens to employment opportunities? What happens to your insurance premiums? What happens to the real estate market? And the reason why I say it's controversial is because it attaches a dollar amount to human life and to human experience. The reason I bring that up now is because somebody watching might say, well, why is this worth doing? And if you can't connect with the intent of saving lives and changing lives and breaking poverty cycles, I'd strongly encourage you to review the numbers and say, yep, this makes complete dollars and cents to do. Project #Engage 416 includes every aspect of what we've learned from our gang prevention town halls, including mentoring opportunities, job placement opportunities, reducing the small crimes because all big things start small, empowering community members, connecting them with job skills and placements, and improving their quality of life on an everyday level, while at the same time strengthening the family structure and putting that at the forefront. The stronger the pillars are at home, being the parents, the stronger the children are going to be, and the less likely they're going to end up in a life of poverty or crime. Oftentimes, I've spoken in depth about the difficulty behind the concept that two opposite things can exist in the same space at the same time. We can enforce the law while at the same time intervening with the most impacted people and preventing youth from continuing down this path. For us at the Toronto Police Service's Integrated Gang Prevention Task Force, we are still currently facilitating gang exit strategies with over 200 gang-involved or at-risk persons, while at the same time executing on Project #Engage 416, identifying and engaging community members to determine how to drive solutions from the inside out. To learn more about either the Toronto Gang Prevention Strategy or Project Engage 416, you can visit our websites at www.torontogangprevention.ca or www.engage416.ca.
So the living in fear aspect, something that we don't tolerate. Well, because of your experience, you're somebody that we definitely want to stay in touch with. Because
Thank you, Jim Hart. Thank you very much for that presentation, Chief, and thank you so much, Detective Constable Chhinzer. It was excellent. Before we go to board members, I know there'll be questions. We do have one deputant. Doobie, can you put the deputant on, and then we will come back to board member questions. Thank you.
Yes, our deputant is Louis March. Louis, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, very good. My name is Louis March. I'm the founder of the Zero Gun Violence Movement. It's a collaboration of over 40 different organizations, agencies, programs across the city of Toronto that are working towards a very ambitious goal of zero gun violence in the city, not only in certain parts of the city, but across the city. There's a difference between living in Rosedale and there's a difference between living in Rexdale. There's a difference between living in High Park and there's a difference in Regent Park. Toronto has become a city of cities. And depending on your postal code will dictate the level of violence or the quality of life that you live. Zero Gun Violence Movement is about identifying these discrepancies and trying to help close the gap by working with these many different organizations. Let me start by thanking Ron and his team for doing the work that they're doing in terms of consultations and also the thoughtfulness and insightfulness of his presentation. What I'd like to say is 1979, I started working under the stewardship of people like Dudley Laws and Charles Roach. We organized the Provincial Black Youth Conference at Skadden Court Community Center to talk about issues that were pertinent to us as black youth at that particular time. The issues were systemic racism, police brutality, and gang violence. And 41 years later, we're still talking about the same. In between, we've done reports and reports, recommendations and recommendations about addressing, identifying the nature of these problems, and what needed to be done. And 41 years later, we're still in the process. We work across the city and we see the good, the bad, and the ugly. We see those people that are victims of gang activity and gun activity. We work with people who are responsible. People who have done the crime, done the time, and want to make a difference. And what we're seeing is a very resourceful, rich, internationally acclaimed city struggling with the issue of gang and gun violence. When a gang leader can tell me in my face that he has a recruitment plan, how to recruit those people that are alienated, feel disconnected into gangs. And I'm saying that as a rich, resourceful city, we cannot compete with gangs in terms of identifying and engaging this population. In the short period of time, I'd like to just say a couple of things. Policing started many years ago. Robert Peel said that policing is the public and the public is the policing. When we take the public out of that equation, we have broken that formula. And when Ron was speaking, he made reference many times to the fact that many people were not engaged in the discussion about gun violence and gang violence. And he realizes that this needs to be fixed. One thing I'd like to say, just in closing also, is the fact that we're looking for quality of policing, not quantity of policing. The population that is engaged in gang and gun activity seldom will attend consultations. When we have a process where we can make complaints when police interact with the public, and the public does not respect that process and will not lodge a complaint, we have a problem. So the issue now has become trust and transparency. When you take public out of that policing equation, this is what we're left with. Ron is correct. It has to be collaborative in terms of response. It has to be focusing on prevention and intervention. And we're not doing a good job there. We have a made in Toronto problem. We need a made in Toronto solution. And that solution should come from a collaborative, collective response that includes all the key stakeholders. The 3 levels of government, the stakeholders, the service providers, the police, correction, so on. We have the resources and means to develop a strategic, comprehensive action plan to deal with this issue. We have the resources and means. We just are lacking the leadership in bringing these stakeholders to the table together. The nature of gun violence and gang violence in the city of Toronto has changed dramatically over the last 20 years, sorry. And some of those major significant changes is the brazenness of the shootings, the age of the people doing the shootings, the influence of social media, access to guns. These are the things that have changed dramatically. And we are still applying solutions that were rooted or created 20, 30 years ago. That's why we need to bring...
Mr. March, you're at 5.5 minutes, so I have to wrap you up, unfortunately. But your deputation was excellent. I really appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to board members. Board members, do you have any questions for the deputant? I believe Councillor Ford has a question. Councillor Ford?
Yes, just a quick question, Mr. Chair, to Mr. March. Thank you for joining us this morning. And Mr. March, I know you do extensive work across the city, particularly in Rexdale. And thank you for your deputation. It was very insightful. Just specifically, you saw the same presentation I did. What were your specific thoughts on how this team has gone about their work?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Ford. Look, Ron has done an incredible job. 30 meetings with community over the last few years. What he has done is problem assessment. We know what the problem is. As I said, in 1979, we started identifying the problem. What is the big challenge now after Ron's report is what do we do with the information that he has gathered? Does it become another report? Does it sit down on another shelf? Does it collect dust? The challenge is not an assessment of the problem. We know what the problem is. There's enough reports that have said that. Even the mayor of the city, he did a report called A Time for Action in 2007, a report on violence affecting youth. and the recommendations that he listed there have still not been implemented. He knows the problem inside out. So the challenge is not as problem assessment. The problem now is leadership and implementation of the recommendations and action items. We know community engagement is critical. But in Ron's report, he made reference several times to the fact that it was not the case. Key stakeholders are not at the table, Mr. Ford. So how can we come up with another report with specific recommendations that make sense, but where's the political leadership and the political will to implement those changes and to assess the progress made from them? I'm hoping that answers your question, sir.
It does very much, Mr. March. Thank you very much.
Any other questions, board members? The deputant?
Vice Chair Mulliner has a question.
Go right ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to begin by thanking Mr. March as well. I know that you have been doing this work, persevering for decades, and I'm very aware of the toll that it can take. So thank you so much for continuing to come to the table and to communicate to this board and to the service with such compassion and empathy. I appreciate very much that there have been far too many reports, and I want to ask a question of the Detective Constable Chhinzer. Thank you very much, Detective Constable. I think that the content, I wasn't able to watch the video, but I think it was mostly a picture of you speaking, and I think the content of what you had to say was excellent. I do appreciate that it was problem assessment, and my question for you is more in the vein of you coming back to make sure that the kind of reports that Mr. March has referenced are acknowledged in your work very publicly. The most recent one that I'm familiar with, which I'm sure it would have been brought to your attention, but because there are so many, you wouldn't have been able to list them in a 13-minute video, is the Roots of Youth Violence, which was written 10 years ago, and Chief Justice at the time, Warren McMurtry and Alvin Curling, were the co-chairs of that commission. That report is lengthy and has an entire volume dedicated to community engagement and community consultation. I think it behooves us as the board to make sure that we do not rebuild things that have already been built. And we've been doing this work, as has been said by others, for a long time. So I'd like to know whether you've had a chance to look at that, and if not, I would invite you to come back to the board, having reviewed it with your team and identifying the parallels that you have now learned have been in place for at least the past 10 years. And then my specific question for you now, and it's about the leadership component that Mr. March mentioned. I'd like to give you the privilege of being the chief of police, and I'm asking you the question, what would you do next, and what do you need in order to address, now that we've assessed the problem, what do you need to do next? Thank you.
Thank you for the kind words. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Mr. March for those kind words. I want to highlight, prior to answering that question, that on our website at torontogangprevention.ca and engage416.ca is an insights and opportunities report highlighting exactly what Mr. March's concerns were. One of the insights, which is number 24, Mr. March, I might refresh your memory, was we are going to be back here in 5 years and nothing is going to be done about it, like always. And that is one of the critical elements that we incorporated from Mr. March himself that really highlighted the fact that we need to take immediate action after consultations. And to answer your question, which ties into this, what we have now in Project #Engage416 are 37 insights and opportunities that we've learned over the process of the 30 gang prevention town halls. Each and every one of those are being actioned in Project #Engage416. None of them are being left out. In terms of what the board or the organization can do, I would recommend that you continue to do what you've been doing, which has been continually supporting us. The Chief Raymer, all senior command have been extremely supportive and open-minded, and us growing new partnerships with both the public and the private sector, bringing on people with lived experience as well as actual experience of changing their communities like Mr. Rico King, and allowing us to grow. So as an organization, I would just say, continue doing what you're doing, support us in the process, allow us to get into places that traditionally police and law enforcement haven't been into, with Mr. March and people like him to really drive solutions from the inside out.
And board members, I believe Councilor Nunziata has a question of the deputant.
Yes,
And
thank
Mr. Morgan next.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Question to Ron. Now, as you know, I attended all the town hall meetings that were held in my ward. What if you can
Sorry,
elaborate?
Councilor Nunziata, I don't want to interrupt, but we're doing questions of the deputant right now, and then I'm going to come back to questions of Ron and the chief, et cetera.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Any questions specific to the deputant?
Yes, actually, I do have a question to the deputant. Would you not agree that if we speak directly to the young youth at a very young age and have them engaged on asking questions and what changes they would like to see in the community moving forward, that speaking directly to them will have a huge impact? Do you agree?
Of course I agree. I think Ron alluded to it early. It starts out small. For us, it's the elementary school level. If we're going to talk about sex education at grade 3, we should be talking about community safety and financial literacy at that same level, because they're as important. The young ones today are learning their lessons early, and they're learning them not from the school system, but from social media and peer pressure. The earlier we can start implanting some positive alternatives, when gang leaders can recruit them with their limited resources, why can't we identify and get them engaged early? The earlier we do this, the better it will be. And I'd like to suggest that the earlier we get to it, the less cost it will take society and our city. The longer it takes for us to get it, the cost will increase dramatically, and we all end up paying for it.
Right. No, and I agree. And so what I did personally with the fall staff on that community, I met with a number of young youth, asking them what their concerns are and what issues and their difficulties that they're having. A lot of them was during the education system, they were having issues. And they brought forward a number of recommendations and changes they would like to see in the community. So I felt that speaking directly to them and that it was very productive. And there were a lot of comments made from the young youth that I really was not aware of. And we need to focus on speaking directly to them and working with them at a very young age. A lot of them are having difficulties in school, and they don't feel that they matter, and I think that's very important.
I think it's listening to them, but it's also actioning what they're talking about.
Right.
They say they're tired of telling people what to do.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
It's what do we do with that information? Do we sit down on it, or do we implement or action it? Show them some action in terms of we did listen and we did respond.
Right.
Listening alone is not good enough, Counselor.
Yes, and I did listen and I action, because some of the recommendations they wanted was changes at the community center, improvements, and a lot, and job fairs, which I did action, and they were very impressed. And I had over 200 youth that attended the job fair that I hosted. So I did listen and I did action. So I think that's very important.
Thank you.
Mr. Morgan, did you have a question of the deputant?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chairman Hart. And first of all, thank you, Mr. Marsh, as a community elder, the work you've been doing, especially the work that often goes unseen. I want to thank you for that on a personal level and also as a board member. So I wanted to say that, but I think it's important. There's conversations around, speaking and getting to youth at an early age. As someone that works in the school system, and children from 4 years old on up, they're very much aware, and I think we often don't fully respect their understanding of knowledge of what's going on around them. So I'm definitely a support of that. But I think the question I want to pose to you is around I think just you mentioned not necessarily having the right people at the table, and so one would be who and what table are you speaking of in terms of these solutions, and two, from your perspective, what how would you measure success? I understand, obviously with your organization, Zero Gun Violence, but what are the levels of success and how do you measure that? And as a board, what can we do to support that level of success?
Thanks for the question. Look, Toronto is an incredible, resourceful, internationally acclaimed city. If they do a survey and we're not in the top 10, we are surprised. We are a leader in terms of metropolitan cities in the world. One thing that we've missed on this issue is that we have not brought those key stakeholders together. Everybody's working very good in silos. Until you coordinate and collaborate with the social media impact, with education, with family, with the 3 levels of government, how are the guns getting into the community, crossing the border? At the provincial level and at the municipal level, corrections, policing. The police are left holding the bag because we don't do a good job up front. This is not right. If we cannot agree to bring everybody to the table together and craft a strategic action plan that is reflective of the inputs of the victims who we work with, the people that are responsible, the young people that Councilor Nunziata spoke about, they need to be at the table. But not only listening is about moving forward with the discussion. We can craft a Made in Toronto strategic action plan that includes the input of all the stakeholders. We have never done that. Everybody is doing their work in their silos, individually. And that's why we will never have the collective or maximum impact that we need. The solution to gun violence and gang violence is not as difficult as people are making it out to be. It's just that everybody's trying to, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, Mr. Counselor. Sorry, Mr. Board Member. All the pieces are out there. Can we connect them to complete the puzzle? That's where we have failed. We have not brought them all together and connected the pieces. The police is just one piece of it. Education is just one piece. Family is just one piece. Social media is just one piece. The security at the border is just one piece. Let's bring them all together and let's trust the process to come up with a strategic action plan that is comprehensive in nature, not individual in nature. That's what we need to focus on. Now, we've not been able to do that. And that is why this problem is growing and growing and growing and taking up more resources than we thought would be necessary to solve it. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I want to be very specific. So as a board member, I just, from your perspective, given the challenges that you're seeing, given the position that we hold and responsibility of the board, where do you see the board fitting into this?
The board has to set up specific action items that must be listed and must be time framed, and they have to be reported on. The Toronto Police Services does an excellent job of providing data on shootings, homicides, and crime activity. Every Monday morning I go in there and I check the statistics. They're very current and updated, right? And it's reported to the public. We have to do a better job of reporting other pieces of this problem to the public in terms of program, funding, initiatives, because there's a lot of money being spent on the street, for example, for programming. The communities are not underserved, they're poorly served. The communities are not underserved, they are poorly served. We need to start reporting on the achievements and the accomplishments that are resulting from the money that's being invested. And we're not doing that. So the board, from a policing point of view, is understand the concept of Robert Peel. The police is the public and the public is the police. When you take the public out of that equation, you're left with the police alone. Please include the public in your decision making, but do it in a transparent and public way so that the public can become more involved. The public right now feels as though they're on the periphery. Bring them into the decision-making process, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Mayor Tory, do you have a question of the deputant?
Well, I did.
Mr.
Mr. March, notwithstanding that you're a critic from time to time, which we need to have, and so I thank you for that. I thank you very much for your continued activism on this. And so I was going to ask a question that sort of tried to focus down. I mean, I have a different responsibility beyond just being a member of the board. I'm not trying to minimize that, but I have, obviously, I'm in a position where I have other responsibilities that very much relate to this issue. And I just sometimes, like what I heard you just saying about bringing people together and so on, I would be terrified to do that only for this reason. I'm being painfully honest about this, that you or other people might say, well, here we go, we're having another meeting, even though it will appear to be different people at the table that you might argue this time are the right people, and that you'd end up, having a really good meeting with a lot of good. I've never been to one of these that were bad in terms of people sort of putting forward constructive suggestions. But so in that regard, when I hear you saying that, I'm very inclined to do that always. But I wanted to sort of ask you if I could, and every comment that's been made along the way, in terms of the young people, for example, I mean, I took note of the fact that the people arrested yesterday in respect of that incident that happened out in North York, one of them was 15 years old, and that engagement or alleged engagement didn't start yesterday. It started well before that. If you were to say to me, okay, as mayor or a police board member, but I wear both hats simultaneously, what is the one thing, the first thing? Would it be that bringing together of people that is better done, the jigsaw puzzle coming together, or because I'm frustrated often. I talk about the three things that we do, which is supporting the police and what they have to do, including some of the activity that prompted this discussion this morning, changing some of the laws, and then investing in neighborhoods and kids and families, of which we're doing much more as a city. We're not doing everything collectively as governments that we could, but we are certainly doing way more as a city than we were before, although I have no way of knowing, quite frankly, sometimes whether what we're doing is right. I mean, because we've made those investments based on what people told us to do or advised us to do. So if you had to name the one thing that I should devote, much more of my energy to in terms of trying to address this, what would that be?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Mayor. When we see across North America the problem of gun violence and gang violence being addressed, what we normally see is the mayor of the city rolling up the sleeves or getting directly involved and saying, this is my plan, this is how I'm going to accomplish it, and this is how I'm going to report on it. When I listen to the stuff coming out of City Hall, I know what you've said. I'm going to support the police and provide them the resources. We're going to invest in communities and families and kids. I'd like to see a more active role in bringing those stakeholders together and showing some leadership there. Because right now we have incredible people doing incredible work, incredible organizations doing incredible work. But they're all doing them in silos. Money is being spent. But who is monitoring the impact of that money being spent? There's a difference between dead money and good money. There's too much dead money out there. The people that need to be at these programs are not going to show up at the programs because the service providers deliver services between 9 and 5. The people that are involved in criminal or gang activity work from 9 to 5. But that's from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Right? We have to connect these pieces. This influence of social media in terms of some of the territorial beefs recently is driven by social media. We need to bring those people to the table. And I know that you alluded to the fact that you dread doing that. because there's going to be another. But I think they should be tasked to come up with a strategic action plan, a made in Toronto strategic action plan with time frames, short term, medium term, and long term. This is not a beefing session. This is a session to come up with something concrete. And then we trust the process and we trust the people to implement and action it. But that leadership has to come from your office, with all due respect.
Okay.
It has to come from your office in terms of, this is the mandate. Do we need to set up and hire a special commissioner to orchestrate that? Or can it come from your office? This is the leadership that we're looking for, that we've not seen.
I tell you what, I just, Mr. Chair, it's a statement more than a question, but just to conclude my own participation, I will take you up on that. And I think just looking at my screen, one of the great advantages to this is every one of the people on the screen, all the board members, they all have their own interest and experience with this. And I'm going to take you up on it too, though, because you have, and seek your guidance, because I'm happy to try one more time. I'm just, sometimes you get afraid of the fact that people just say that your answer was to call another meeting. You know, like I sort of prefer, but I totally agree with you. Even all the investments we're making as a city, I worry sometimes that we're making it and it's dramatically increased over what it was, but I don't have any way myself of measuring the effectiveness of it. It's very difficult. We're trying to do that with all these youth programs right now, as you may know. We're having a detailed report that's supposed to come out to the council any day. So I will take you up on that, and I'm going to seek your advice as well as my colleagues that are here, because they all have a perspective and an involvement with this in the past, and I include the police in that, the people there in the boardroom. And so I will do that. It'll be happening within days that we'll take the initiative to start to gather that. And by the way, I think it should be a meeting held initially in private so that there isn't a great sort of publicity thing attached to it, people grandstanding, because we don't need that. There's no need for that at all. We just need people to sit down and have that discussion you had, and I will commit to doing that, and we'll do it. We'll try and get it scheduled before the end of the year, the first meeting, and your advice on who should be there, as well as the others.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Ms. Kostakis, you have a question of the deputant?
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Mr. March. Thank you so much. I'm going to come from the perspective, too, of the community, being a social worker over 30 years and working from Regent Park to Rexdale as well on this issue, and Detective Constable Chhinzer also knows. It is very dear to my heart as what we're talking about and experiencing, and I experience and echo your frustration on process. And I know, I guess echoing Mayor Tory's comments of yet another consultation, especially when it comes to children and youth, and also my experience with Boys and Girls Clubs and all, and everything that we do in the violence prevention pieces and the employment and everything that goes there with the mentorship. And that I agree with you that there isn't a lot that's new to us, and that we are full circle now, and this is the time to be intentional about what we do and the actions that we move forward, and that the gangs are definitely using the same theory and the same strategy, and even better at it in recruiting our youth in their gangs with mentorship, with immediate gratification, with other sources too. And I think you may have answered, I believe you have with everyone else's questions, in what the next steps would be. And I agree with the mayor that definitely that needs to happen. What he's talking about should happen immediately, sooner than later. And being one of the agencies, I guess, in our communities too, that is funded in preventative measures with youth violence and other aspects to it, because youth violence is with the outcome of what the issues are really are. So I commend you on everything that you're doing and what you've said. And my question was going to be, what is the immediate intentional next step in moving forward? And I believe what you were saying is that the key stakeholders, and it has to be a holistic approach, and this is everybody's solution and problem on the action piece, not just one person's or just the police. In fact, they are a support during this as opposed to a solution and all of us working together. And I would just wanted you to comment on that.
Thanks for the question. We're at the crossroads now. We have an opportunity now that we never had before. There's a heightened awareness about the problems. There's a heightened awareness by the young people who have been protesting for weeks, right? That change is necessary. There's a heightened awareness in terms of people that want to find solutions. So we have an opportunity now. Are we going to do another report with consultation? Or are we going to come up with a strategic action plan? I think that's what we need to focus on, right? This is an opportunity that I've never seen in the last 40 years. We've got to seize this moment. There's a sense of urgency. Ron spoke about the cost. For every one, he didn't mention it this way, but I'm going to say this. For every $1 we invest up front in terms of prevention and intervention, we save $6 on the back end. Like, if that doesn't speak to where we should be focusing our efforts, by the time the police get involved, it's too late. There's a cycle of violence. There's something called outsourcing violence now, where the older heads in the community are outsourcing the violence to young ones. Imagine that. Because the penalty and the glory is not the way we measure it for the young ones. We need to be able to compete with that. So we're at the crossroads now. We have an opportunity here, and I sense from the questions that there is a real concern to do something about this. And I just don't want to lose this moment, to lose this opportunity. But I think bringing those key stakeholders is important together, not as a bitching session, right? But really as we need a strategic action plan, and that is the outcome that we need from them, medium term, short term, and long term. And I think we have the resources and means to do it. The mayor has committed to doing it, so I'm happy to hear that. But we want to see change take place. Everybody wants to feel safe, whether you walk, I walked for 5 minutes in Lawrence Heights last week, and I only saw one person on the street because everybody was in shutdown mode. In Driftwood, it's the same thing. In Regent Park, depending on which part, it's the same thing. People are self-imposed curfews because of living in fear. So yes, policing as we see it, right, is not about quantity of policing, it's quality of policing. We need to feel safe in our system regardless of where we live. Everybody wants that. The mothers who have lost their children to gun violence, they cry 24/7. But you just don't see their tears. You hear them, but you don't see them. We can do better. And I think if we can bring the stakeholders together and build off of the work that Ron has been doing, and build off the report that even the mayor did in 2007, A Time for Action, and build off the recommendations from the Tulloch reports and so on, we can craft a Made in Toronto solution where people from around the world come to our city to find out how we solve this problem, instead of us going to other cities to find out how they solve theirs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I agree with everything. Thank you.
Councillor Ford, did you have a question of the deputy?
To the service, not to the deputy,
Okay.
when the time's appropriate.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions for you, Mr. March. Thank you very much. That discussion was terrific, and we really appreciate you coming today. You added an extremely large amount of information to this board meeting, and we value your input. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Chair, and let's do it. We can do it. We can win this one.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I agree with you. With people like you, I'm sure we can. Thank you.
Have a good day.
I'll now go to questions of the service. On my list right now, I have first Mayor Tory, then Vice Chair Molinar, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Ford, myself, and if anyone else has questions, please let me know as we go. We'll start with Mayor Tory.
Chief, I'm fine. Not Chair. I had my, you could be the chief if you want. I think the chief would happily let you take that on for a few days. I'm okay to watch the others' questions and take my, if necessary.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I will take the chief job. I could use the promotion.
Yeah, exactly.
Vice Chair. Vice Chair
Well,
Molinar.
be careful what you wish for, Chair. So I did ask my question at the wrong time earlier, so the services had a heads up, and I guess my question is twofold. How was the work that has been done in the past, and I referenced the Roots of Youth Violence report, which was completed in 2008, so 12 years ago, used as part of the problem assessment as Mr. March has identified it. And then I had the aspirational question to you, Detective Constable, to know if you were the chief, what would you need now to make the TPS part of the equation, because we have heard, and it is true, that this is a multilateral, multi-level problem that needs to be solved. What would you need to do as a next step? Thank you.
Well, to answer your first question in regards to those previous reports, during our initial primary assessment of how bad and how big the gang problem was, and not just the city of Toronto, but worldwide, we had read over 150 academic and peer-reviewed publications starting from 2003. We worked our way all the way up here. Some of the difficulties we found is when we're citing old data, it's being cited from old data. So a publication today can be cited from data from 2000, which is non-relevant. That's the answer to that first question. So yes, we took a very hard evidence-based approach. To answer the second question,
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because I just want to make very clear that the report I'm referencing has a chapter on community engagement. I did not hear you reference it in the video. I did not hear you reference it now. I cannot tell you how important it is that your team, that the community know you have processed and read that and assessed it against the recommendations. There's nothing new in there, but I think you will find, especially since the community was consulted as recently on this very issue, about 12 years ago, that it is highly relevant again. Thank you.
Yes, that was included as part of the academic research, was Toronto Police Service specific reports, including that report as well as the way forward, and we keep it current, up to date to the 81 recommendations made to the boards that the board recommended going forward. Does that suffice?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Now, going on to answer your second question, the comment and the discussion was passionate, but I want to take this time to be frank and redirect it. There is no need for further consultation based off of the town halls. Project Engage is direct action as a result of that. There is a very strict and stringent timeline. We have different phases. We have monthly revisits to readjust. We're not hardstone to everything. We have strict KPIs being key performance indicators. We know what our deliverables are, and it is very focused on the community as well as the 4 pillars. One thing I'd like to mention, as well as many other things, is there's so much talk about the youth. One thing we did learn was what happens beyond that. What happens when that youth is at home? They come from somewhere, being their parents. As much as we deal with youth, the reason we don't see the dividends is we're not around them 23 and a half hours of the day. So we've extended our efforts as of September 14th of this year into going into their family homes. At the very beginning clip of the 13 minutes that I showed was a 40-second clip of us. While I'm here, I'm representing a larger team. That's us knocking on doors. That's real life footage. We have that conversation 3 to 5 times a week throughout the city of Toronto. We're going right to gang members and their families with the intent of developing neighborhood teams. Now, those neighborhood teams are the primary delivery mechanism for action. To give you some idea of who we're looking to participate on that neighborhood team on a complete wraparound approach, being prevention, intervention, education, and suppression, talking about law enforcement, outreach workers, adult probation and parole, youth probation, grassroots agencies, social services, family services, employment agencies, schools, mental health, faith-based organizations, community members, city services, community housing, local business reps, and Ministry of Corrections, just to name a few. We're gathering a complete wraparound approach. The consultation period to understand the problem, we understand it very well. I would argue that we understand it better than any other agency in the entire world from our deep, deep consultative work, as well as the combination with the academic body. The strategies that we have specific intervention, prevention, and suppression activities that we already have listed out. We have strict timelines. Our team is already rolling out in operations. We have complete transparency as best as we can on our website at engage416.ca, which lists out our objective, our timelines, our strategies, our recommended activities, as well as who publicly wants to be known as participating on these neighborhood teams. In regards to the mention of social media, that is our #1 aspect of marketing, promotional material, as well as recruiting. Tomorrow morning, as well as next week, I have an online WebEx meeting with 15 volunteers out of 33 who've stepped up and said they want to participate in these initiatives. These volunteers aren't who you think they are. They are franchise community members that want to return their services back to the city of Toronto in opportunities like mentorship, job placement and training, as well as helping identify opportunities where we wouldn't otherwise see them. The strategy here and the action plan is happening. It happened as of September 14th. It's been strongly supported by the senior command of the Toronto Police Service. And the reason why I bring that up is I don't want that to be lost in where we need to go. I don't think we need to meet again. I think we need to revisit our current action plan monthly, annually, and take a look at where we are and where we can be. This won't have a quick fix. This is going to take some time, but we have boots to the ground now as we speak.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking at the TPS website. Maybe you could direct, for my purpose and perhaps others, me to exactly where I would find, hashtag engage 416. Thank you. Where can I find that on the TPS website?
So our website for this, keeping in mind, it's not hosted by the Toronto Police Service. It's a third party that hosts it. We do not track IP addresses or individual user location. Anybody can find it at www.engage416.ca. So it's ENGAGE, the numbers 416.ca. It's hosted by a third party. Again, we don't track anything in terms of IP addresses or where they're coming from, as well as on social media and YouTube. The video that we showed this morning as of 8:45 this morning is available on our YouTube channel as well. But on there, we list out exactly what neighborhoods we're going into. We have their demographics and their equity profiles. We also have the neighborhood team members we're looking to bring in, and then what our listed and specified activities are, as well as where we want to be down the road.
Thank you. Councilor Nunziata. I think you might be on mute, Councilor Nunziata.
You hear me now?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, question to Ron. So Ron, as you know, I attended all those town hall meetings, and during the town hall meetings, it was very clear that the young youth are recruited at a very young age. Now, Rico, with the life experience, and a number of former gang members as well came and spoke at these town hall meetings. Can you just elaborate a bit on what was done in the States as far as community engagement and how they were able to bring that gun violence down from what it was previously?
Well, as we spoke during the gang prevention town halls, I got together with a few guys in the neighborhood who I knew were of opposing gangs, and have had a meeting just like this, a few of them, to discuss what's going on, what's wrong. And most of the time it was just an ego thing. Nobody wants to go through the bloodshed, but nobody also wants to be the first to admit it. So I acted like a diplomat, and I was a mediator, and we came to a conclusion where let's just start at least with within the projects where the kids play and where the family members come home after work. Let's just start there where we don't shoot around there. Let's just have that conclusion, and then we'll throw a block party if we're successful. And then after a few months went by with no shootings, we did have a block party. They did get together, and they realized they had a lot more in common than they had differences. And the impact of that lasted for quite a while.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to that. And job well done. And Ron, I know that there were quite a few community members that were engaged in these town hall meetings. So thank you very much for the work and actually reaching out to some of these communities with the youth. I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate you as well coming out and being so supportive.
Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just want to make a comment quick before I have questions. I thought this morning's discussion has been incredibly productive. Probably one of the most productive discussions we've had since I've been on the board, bar none. Detective Mr. King, thank you so much for your presentation. I thought it's, as I said, a great presentation. And I think what Mr. March said, which rings true, I think it rings true for all of us, but not speaking for anyone else, is the difference between quality and quantity of policing. And I think this is quality. I think this is the definition of it. So I commend you and your team on the work that you're doing. But I guess I have a few questions. So you've done consultations across the city. You've been doing work in communities. What I want to understand is, how does the gang activity in the city of Toronto differ, in your opinion, if it does or doesn't, between neighborhoods across the city?
So I can tell you one of the biggest insights and realizations we had as we're hosting these 30 gang prevention town halls is, while the city of Toronto is a huge city and a massive city, each neighborhood is like its own city, as Mr. March had mentioned. So when we're looking at potential solutions as well as problem identification, it's not always the same. There are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences. Sometimes it has to do with the general age demographic of the population. That has a big impact to play into it. The cultural makeup, the religious background, high crimes that have been particularly happening, levels of poverty, major impactful crime events and historical gang activity. So each of the neighborhoods, they're very unique, but also the same. And I know that sounds really contradictory, but it's the truth. And with each of them, we treat them that way. Developing inroads into those communities, what the strategy we've approached in the town halls, which we've adjusted every one. So from town hall number 1 to town hall number 30, if you were to watch our videos online, they look completely different because we adjusted after every one. We really took the critical feedback and we did adjust with it. And what we realized was, as much as government agencies want to be able to step into a community and assess the problem from the outside, it doesn't work that way. Every problem needs to be solved from the inside out. The outside, our job is to suffocate it. And what I mean by that is, if the inside is continually addressing the problem and pushing it outwards, it has to be stopped at some point, or it'll continue to spread or bridge or grow. With us, our role and our responsibility is to ensure that on the outside, we keep it contained in a box. The way you eliminate the problem and really deal with it and maximize success is you penetrate the middle. Now, we can't penetrate the middle, but the town halls helped us identify community members that are already in the middle. The leaders, whether they're younger or older, it didn't matter. We knew who the vocal leaders were and the people who had the most influence. So with us, our aim is, with these people in each one of these communities, they're all different. As long as we know the right people to contact and they can understand our messaging and we can communicate with them effectively and in line with the greater good, it doesn't really matter the makeup of the community. What does matter is, what are the individual relationships that we have, and if they have a something to gain from the long-term goal. And our long-term goal is a lofty one. It's having success for everybody, as well as breaking generational cycles of poverty and really eliminating gangs on a different level. The different level being the youth that are getting recruited into gang lifestyles are being recruited by other youth that went through the same thing. So while there's a lot of talk and contention and speaking about prevention efforts, we can never negate intervention efforts for those that are already involved in the system that are continuing to recruit and repeat the cycles, or enforcement efforts to ensure that this is going to be a safe community. So there's a lot of talk and focus sometimes, and people get diluted, including us. But we had to really remain objective in the lens and say, look, all 4 pillars, the education, prevention, intervention, suppression, they're all valuable to each other. And one success is dependent directly on the other. So with all that being said, each of the communities, we keep highlighting the framework, we identify the community leaders, and rather than us assess how it needs to be applied, we let them dictate how it gets applied by really encouraging them and empowering them and fostering up on these neighborhood teams. On the neighborhood teams, our role as police officers is oversight. That's what we're there for. We have the best access to information. We have the best access to people's houses. We already have MOUs and information sharing protocols in place. We also have access to police databases that no other agency has. We're also, I would argue, outside of gang member families, the most motivated independent group to solve this problem. To give you a framework as to that, the example I use is, gangs are a sandwich. The bottom piece of bread are the families that they come from. All the ingredients in between is their school, the probation officers, the social services that they go to, any other impacted stakeholders in the middle. And as they cycle through this process of life from 0 to 18, being the bottom bred family, the critical element and the critical breaking point is the time serious gang violence happens, which is where police officers get involved. There is no 912. We can't call anybody. And in our job, when I talk about the individual motivations, I'm talking about the hundreds of police officers that I know personally, as well as my own experiences, where none of us take any joy whatsoever in having to notify a parent that their 15-year-old child is not going to come home today or come across those crime scenes. I would have a strong argument, and I would gladly live by this, that says that there's nobody outside of families more motivated from us to find the solution. Because of that, and the neighborhood teams, our goal is to keep that motivation at the forefront, ensure transparency, and the right people are included in the process. Unfortunately, during our initial consultations with all the government agencies and stakeholders on the horizontal and vertical level. The truth is there's a lot of organizational ego with some agencies, and because of different fiscal periods, different projects, different capital commitments, it becomes almost impossible to merge everybody into one isolated focus without having a strong head. That strong head is where we want to stay as police officers, not as the ultimate answer to this, but as the one that's the driving force with the families to say, look, we need to work on this together.
Excellent. Detective, how do we, and I know a great answer. Well, I think what we're trying to drive at, and I agree with what you have shared. How do we drive at that middle? You said, you know, we aren't in the middle, and there's a number of factors that contribute to getting to that. How can, because I really do think you guys have an incredible grasp on this. How do we get to that middle? And I think this is part of the conversation that Mr. March had and the mayor, is that, you know, to the mayor's credit, you know, has put an extraordinary amount of effort, and this city council has, into putting investments in communities. But how do we bring that all together? Is your team, so example, so a question, are you sharing your work with the Ministry of Education or education partners? And that's just one part of it, right?
And we have multiple partners actually working with this. The video got cut off, but the video was showing about 7 of our listed partners right now. Those partners include the City of Toronto and their Community Safety and Wellbeing, Toronto Community Housing, the Ministry of Solicitor General, the Ministry of the Attorney General, as well as various other municipal arms and agencies. And with us, when you talk about penetrating that middle, how do we get in that middle? The reality is it's all relationships. It's not about an organization, it's about the individual person. So for us, depending on the climate and the community, what we do is we do a general canvas. You go into any neighborhood and you just talk to the local people. They'll tell you who are the go-to people. And once we find that out, we say, well, who already has a relationship with this person? There's really no need to invade anybody's personal space. We just take existing relationships and we leverage them towards a common goal. So to penetrate it, it's people.
Excellent. Well, I, of course, maybe have a conversation with the mayor offline, but I don't know what there might be, what the mayor may have in mind and his team and whatnot. But I think you should be at the table. And Chief, I really, you know, I think Torontonians should be proud of this team you have working on this. Thank you.
Agreed, by the way, agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Board members, anyone else have questions? Ms. Kostakis, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Ron and everyone. Thank you so much for everything that you've been doing and have done. I know we've spoken offline as well. I was just going to ask, and your thoughts on this too, when we talk about the stakeholders, and I agree with you 1,000% of the sandwich piece, and that we've been dealing with it for many, many years and have the same findings as well in the sectors. But in moving forward as well, and I know you've engaged with other partners and other community agencies, et cetera, and the other stakeholders for that wraparound service approach. Has there any thought been put into place, or have you already reached out? I know there were 12 agencies that went through, and not just to focus on the youth piece of it, the youth violence prevention grants that the mayor initiated as well. And there's agencies out there with those grants, and in using your model and in moving forward, that not everybody maybe, and to Mr. March's approach, is there's services out there, are they quality services? Are they serving accordingly? And with that effectiveness and impact, positive impact. Because I think we're always going to be doing either prevention or trying to achieve prevention, but there's also the harm reduction piece, and the reality of what you talked about in the intervention is always going to be in existence. So have you reached out, or is there a way for those agencies to reach out to you in being part of this model and steps moving forward, and access to the resources of the findings as well, but also to the intentional action plans and moving forward?
Yes, every week we're reaching out to at least 15 to 20 organizations, social service agencies, grassroots groups, faith-based organizations. So what we've done is we've taken the entire city. We have 12 pockets we're focusing on. We're treating those 12 pockets as independent cities. And in there, we've identified through a partnership with Guelph Humber University, local people, evaluated programs, real reputable social services, and we're always conducting outreach to have them participate in the neighborhood teams. It's a continual process. If anybody listening wants to participate and wants to help out, you don't even have to be in the city of Toronto. We can figure something out. They can go to our website at engage416.ca. Our email addresses are all listed in there. You can email us there, or generally at gangprevention@torontopolice.on.ca. It goes to an entire team. So while I'm here, we do have a team of 5 officers, and we are actively in the neighborhood. Right now, as I speak, 4 of the other officers are in a really impacted neighborhood doing exactly what you're speaking about.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. It's just, I think it's also part of that strategy. Those 12 agencies should also be communicating with each other. I know there's that uniqueness approach as how that service will be delivered within the unique neighborhoods, but also just the fundamental pieces of the commonalities of what those risk factors are should also be taken into consideration. So the right arm and the left arm citywide, we should all be working together instead of those silos that we talk about and those commonalities. And now they see the chief's back too. So to echo Councillor Ford's and Mayor Tory's comments, you guys are an excellent team. Everything that you've been doing and continue to do and have done in the past, as I've watched the progress as well, being part of this, the consultations and the work and the collaborations. So thank you so much for everything that you're all doing.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And you were there at Town Hall number 1. So thank you for coming out and sticking through the process. And just to add in addition to what you're saying, our website was purposely not hosted by Toronto Police Service with the intent of at some point this being a true integrative body, and it's an easy handoff piece. We're not taking complete ownership of it. We want to drive it through and at some point down the road continually reassess. And if some other agency, entity, organization, or stakeholder is deemed better suited given that current climate, there's no problems doing a complete handoff.
Yeah. I agree 100% with your strategy on that, because a lot of people that need to be, and to Mr. March's point about the people that are coming even to the programs, it's not necessarily all of the people that are coming to the programs that should be at those programs for the purpose of it and the intentional piece. So I agree with you 1000% on everything that you've been saying.
Thank you. Board members, any final questions before I ask if anyone wishes to speak? I have a couple myself. Anyone else? Mr. Morgan? Okay. I just have a couple of questions. Mr. Morgan, did you have a question?
No, I'm okay. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, great. As you know, Ron and Rico, I came out to Town Hall in Councillor Nunziata's ward a number of months back and was extremely impressed by what you delivered that night, and promised then that I would get you before the board because I thought everybody should hear what we've heard today, and you've done an absolutely terrific job. Ron, you're leading a great group and nailing everything as you go. We're all very proud of the work that you do, as I'm sure the chief is. I just have one question. Councillor Nunziata asked the question I was going to ask, and Ron, you've been asked lots of questions, so I'm just going to ask one more of Rico. Rico, is there anything that you've learned in your U.S. experience that you want to share with us that you haven't had a chance to share today? You gave us a lot of information the night that I saw you, so I just want to give you that opportunity if there's anything else you wanted to say.
Sorry, can you repeat that question one more time?
Yeah, sure, Rico. Just, is there anything that you have learned in your U.S. experience that you haven't had a chance to talk about today? And if so, please use this time to do that.
Well, with my U.S. experience, I learned a lot from, you know, the hardcore individuals, which I feel don't have a voice in this whole situation. And I feel like they harbor some of the best solutions. And without their point of view, I think it's going to be hard to tackle this situation. That's about it, really. It's very similar, which is pretty surprising to me. When I came to Toronto, I didn't think I was going to experience in such a similar lifestyle in 2 different countries. And it was shocking the amount of crime that's happened since I've gotten here and how many people I've interviewed, and I've learned a lot. And I still think Toronto is in great hands because of the fact that we're all working together. You got guys like me from south of the border, and you got people here from different communities that really give this situation a lot of importance, which is really valuable in my opinion. and we're around I think eventually we'll see the impact of the town halls. It's going to might take 5 years, might take a little more, but I feel like eventually the impact will show. And I'm here for any other questions. I hope I answered your question correctly.
Thank you very much, Rico. Now I'll turn over to speakers. Any board members wish to speak to this item? I know the chief has something to say. I'll get to the chief in a minute. Councilor Nunziata?
Want the chief to speak first?
Oh, the chief will follow the board members. Go right ahead, Councilor.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, I'm pleased that we were able to get them on the agenda for today for that presentation. As you know, when you attended one of the town halls in my ward months ago, that we did talk about getting having a presentation to the board. So I'd like to thank Ron and Rico and actually thank everyone that participated in those town hall meetings. One thing that Lewis March mentioned that I agree with is that we have a number of agencies out there which we fund that is working in silos. And I think it's important that we bring these agencies together and we have more of a dialogue one-on-one with the youth. I find that speaking to them one-on-one, just not in a big setting, but in a small setting, speaking to them and asking them what their issues are, concerns, what changes they'd like to see. It's amazing how much they open up to you. I did that at Falstaff, and I had about 20 youth that opened up and suggested to me what they wanted to see in the community, what their issues were, what their personal life was, as well as their education, how they were failing in the school, and they needed more of a mentoring. And so it's amazing what you can get when you speak one-on-one with the youth, and I think that we need to do more of that. During the town hall meetings, with the presentations, they talked about youth being recruited at a very young age. One of the examples, Ron, that you gave, where that young youth had his bicycle stolen 3 times, and then at the end of the day, he was recruited as a gang member. And speaking to some of the former gang members, and I've spoken to them personally, it's really, it's amazing what they tell you and how they started in a gang and how they were able to get their life and get out of the gangs. And so I think we need to do more of that, working directly with the youth and working with people like Lewis as well. I think that he has made a lot of great recommendations, and which I support, and I think we all support. Maybe we need to get him involved as well. I did a safety audit the other night on Tuesday at Falstaff with 12th Division, and we were speaking to where we have a lot of shootings in Falstaff. We've had a lot of young kids shot. And we were speaking to some of the community members, the people that lived in Toronto housing and some of the young youth. And they informed me that they were afraid to go and play in the playground because of the number of guns, the gun violence. They were petrified. So, you know, when you have the community feeling unsafe, even to play in a playground or be on the streets, I think it's important that this is a priority to me, and it's a priority to all of us. So thank you very much for the presentation, and I'm looking forward to working, you know, with you. And maybe it would be a good idea if we formed some sort of committee working, and we can move along and work with the agencies and the communities, and maybe get them together and come up with a plan that we can work and engage the whole community. I think it's very important, especially the youth. I think it's important that we engage the youth. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors. Any other board members wish to speak before I turn over to the chief? Councilor Ford, go ahead.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Chair, because I did kind of speak during my questions as well. It's kind of a hybrid moment, but I will be very brief. I thank them for the work that they're doing. I think this is incredible work. You're doing incredible work in some of, you know, Toronto's, you know, hottest pockets of crime, and and inequities and whatnot, and how you have presented this to the board in such a thoughtful, particular way, I think is very helpful. And I think, you know, us as a city, we've invested a ton of money into, you know, the poverty reduction strategy and a number of things that, you know, the city has rightfully done. But, you know, I agree with Mr. March that, you know, we can keep throwing money into certain initiatives and programs that, you know, do have merit to them. But I think we do need to bring it together. I think we do need to have a united table, which I think should be created. And I understand what the mayor said. It's, you know, it isn't another, you know, group that comes together and just talks about stuff. I think it really needs to be driven. And I think there's an opportunity there. I think, you know, Detective and your group should be at that table. And I think we should bring other partners, you know, intergovernmental, kind of an intergovernmental approach to it. And you also said, Ron, that, you know, government can only do so much from a top-down perspective. And I think it's going into that middle where I think that the community needs to be. And we've seen that. We've consulted community groups. I've been in hundreds of meetings in North Etobicoke on issues of crime and how do we move forward. And it's the common elements that come out of every single meeting we have or whatnot is being shared here. Now I think it's not as much about consultation. I think it's having the right people at the table. We know what has to be done. Right people need to be at the table. And I think the community has to be at the table in whatever pockets or across the city to drive it forward. So I think there is incredible opportunity here. I myself will sit at any table to help drive this. Mr. Mayor, you have that support in any way possible, and we can really make something come out of this and invest our money wisely into good approaches and make it worthwhile. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I look forward to seeing stuff come out of this.
Thank you, Councilor Ford. Any other board members? Mayor Tory, go right ahead.
Well, first of all, I would just like to say, I think I alluded to it before, thank you to Detective Ron and to the team and to the chief, because I do think this, as Councillor Ford said, has been just an excellent discussion this morning. You know, they say about the definition of insanity is to sort of keep up the same behavior over and over and over again and expect a different result. And that is why I'm fearful about, you know, sort of convening another meeting and sort of hoping that you'll get a different result, because there's been so many meetings held, like Councillor Ford said. I mean, I'm older than him, so, and I did write what I think was generally reviewed as being an excellent report, and I wrote large parts of it personally in 2007 on this very subject, and I was the opposition leader at the time. So talk about an opportunity where you can write a report and not have much promise that it's going to get implemented, because those things often don't. But I find this issue to be the most perplexing, alongside homelessness. They're the two that I find to be very perplexing. Although homelessness, in a way, is easier to deal with. I mean, it's more easily understood, sort of what you have to do, because there's like a hard, physical, tangible thing that has to come out of it to help solve the problem, which is different kinds of housing, affordable, supportive, and so forth. This one is more complicated in that it isn't a hard, tangible, physical thing that has to come out of it. But I am quite prepared, as I said to Mr. March, and of course I've already reached out to a member of my team to get the contact information for Detective Ron and for Mr. March, because and I will, as I said, recruit my board colleagues to the cause of saying, well, all right then, and I will follow through, subject to criticism from some quarters, I'm sure, at having the beginnings of that happen in private, simply because I think then it avoids some of the stuff where there's a huge amount of attention paid and people start making statements they think they have to make, and maybe we can just try to put those pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, because we have to come to grips with this. I mean, it is corroding neighborhoods, it is corroding trust, you know, on the part of the broader public with the police, just because they say, well, surely you must have some way you can, you know, resolve this. It is corroding. It is ruining the lives of those kids. I mean, when you get arrested at 15 and let's say you get convicted of some act of gang violence or gun violence, I mean, it's your life isn't over, but it's certainly, you know, heading down the wrong path to say the very least. And so I just have an intense, and people are terrorized by this. It ruins families. You know, you all know, I don't have to say it. So I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I will take another try. I mean, you have to keep trying when you're in the job that I'm in, and all of us as board members and elected representatives have to keep trying. And I think if it is, and I heard what Detective Ron said, it's why I want to speak to him equally about having another meeting. And so I will reach out to them, but this has been a very useful catalyst to sort of taking something that I know confounds the police as well, and trying to take another run at it, perhaps with some, you know, some different experiences and different information that's been gathered through all the work that the detective and his team have done, and also Mr. March, who's a very, I mean, he can be a very severe critic, but he's a very diligent, determined man in terms of sticking with this issue for a long, long time. So I admire that, and I think we could benefit from him. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. Any other board members? Okay, over to you, Chief.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I am very excited about this program. It's why the command agreed very early on here, and I think we did it in September, was to enhance this unit and to give it official status. I'm also excited by the fact that what you're seeing here from Ron, that type of enthusiasm and passion, is being exhibited by a number of officers that want to participate in this program. And so I think what we need to understand is this is a fundamental change in the way we're doing policing. We're not doing things to communities. We're building relationships with those communities. We're building trust. We're building confidence, and we're mobilizing resources. And then at the same time, and that's a real focus on that community building and prevention side, when we look strategically in terms of our enforcement side, we are being very much more strategic, very much more precise to make sure we're attacking or enforcing those small elements that are causing all the problems, but we're focusing on those small elements that are the problem. So I think it's a combination of several things, but it is really an exciting opportunity. And all the work that Ron and his team have done is why we also ended up, there was some excitement at the provincial level, and there was some funding provided for us to continue and take Project Engage forward. So I think we're in a good position right now, and we're very excited with the prospects in the future, and we're going to continue. And I want to thank Ron for his presentation today. I want to thank Rico for his friendship, his partnership, and his insight today, and coming to the board meeting. So thanks very much, and I thank the board for their questions, and Louis for his presentation and deputation today.
Thank you, Chief. Just to reiterate, what a terrific presentation. You started the day off with something I don't think any of us will forget anytime soon. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to bring it back to the board. Can I have a motion to receive the presentation for item number 2? Ms. Kostaka, seconded by Councillor Ford. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, item number 2 carries. Thank you so much, everyone. Now we're going to move forward to item number 3, which is Police Reform Implementation Dashboard. Mr. Teschner, would you like to introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As everybody knows, in August, the board approved a report containing 81 recommendations addressing police reform, making very clear that this was the beginning of that work or the continuation of that work and nowhere close to the end of the road. But the other important commitment that the board made was to make the work as it continues very transparent so that there is some public accountability for implementation. Transparency is really the key to the success of these reforms and key to building public trust between the board, the service, and members of the public that we serve. Today, we're unveiling a dashboard, a public-facing dashboard that will be available both on the board's website as well on the service's website. And this dashboard is an important element in achieving transparency to demonstrate continuous progress in implementing the reforms that have been initiated by the board. Through this dashboard, members of the public will be able to see what has been done and what remains to be done. The dashboard is developed iteratively, and we're going to continue to learn from reactions we get from the public so that we can improve it, expand it, provide additional and better information on the implementation of those reforms, and work out some bugs as we encounter them. So we should note that right now the dashboard doesn't track the impacts of those reforms or the achievement of the goals set by the board, but as we move forward on implementing, we'll also be developing exactly those indicators to track impacts and report on the progress through a separate tool. So today, it's about transparency, letting the public in on where we're going, how well we've done, and what remains to be done, so that on any given day, someone can access this information and see for themselves. So before I turn it over to the service for the walkthrough, I want to thank Superintendent Rob Johnson and his team, Ian Williams, our Manager of Analytics and Innovation, and his team for developing this tool, and from our office, Dewey Buchanan Gisser, one of our senior advisors, for his work in coordinating this. And now I'll turn it over, if I can, to Superintendent Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Teschner. Just before the superintendent starts, I'll remind the deputant that we'll hear from you after the presentation. Go right ahead.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Service Board. Thank you for this morning. Ian and myself are here today to provide you with a brief presentation on the Police Reform Implementation Dashboard. And as Mr. Teschner had mentioned, this dashboard was created to allow members of the public to follow the progress on the implementation of the 81 recommendations on police reform coming from the Services Board. As you will see, there are 4 views and an information page, and each page is very interactive. Page 1 is a recommendation summary page. Page 2 will show the recommendations by board theme. Page 3 is going to show you the recommendations by lead unit. And page 4 will give you some specific recommendation details. There's also a last page that's represented by the eye in the lower right corner. And what that page will provide is a summary of the dashboard with definitions, among other things, that we hope everybody will find useful. And it will also include links to things like the original police reform report. The dashboard provides open access to the most up-to-date information and the results of the various recommendations, and will answer any questions one might have with respect to these recommendations. There's a number of ways to access the dashboard. Here there are 3 links that you can see, and they're both fully available and accessible through both mobile devices and desktop computers. As mentioned, the dashboard is interactive, allowing anyone to access the information they require easily, including the ability to filter across several categories, and some of the recommendations will have embedded links within them to allow access to source documents. This dashboard is also completely AODA compliant. The dashboard will also align with the city's 36 recommendations on police reform through a collaborative process to ensure that the information is consistent, and as well as the reporting status on the respective recommendations. Ian is now going to walk you through a live version of the dashboard.
Thank you, Staff Superintendent. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to, as Staff Super mentioned, walk through some of the components of the dashboard that are interactive and will allow any member of the community to access these updates and the status of each recommendation. So as we mentioned, this is now a live and fully publicly available tool, which we have been providing updates as of this moment, and we will continue to provide updates on an ongoing basis as we move forward. What you'll see on the main page is a high-level overview of the recommendations and the parts of the organization which are responsible for implementing those recommendations. And importantly, they're grouped by theme as they pertain to the nature of the change and the nature of the reform that we are working towards. And so what you will expect is a level of interactivity where you can select components of these recommendations and recognize very quickly, in this instance, police budget and budget transparency, for example, how many recommendations are related to those changes, how many have been completed, and how many are in progress. And we've put a small indicator to demonstrate the level of completion across those areas. As we move through the dashboard, you can examine specific recommendations by theme. So those themes are very important in understanding how this change and how this reform will be undertaken, in that they're very deliberately created so that we can discuss the importance of those changes in relation to areas such as alternative response models, building public confidence, ensuring change. And so as we undertake a lot of this work, we will ensure that the completed initiatives are highlighted, and where the completion is done, we'll be able to actually show a link or the outcome of those recommendations. And there are a number already, as we can see, that have been completed. As we move through the dashboard, it's also possible for community members or stakeholders to examine the units or the teams that are responsible for these implementations within the service. And so it's, as you know, interactive to a point where you can select different parts of the organization. In this case, the Toronto Police Services Board, for example, has a number of recommendations. We can see the number of which that have been completed, those that are in progress, and actually have a very quick view as to the recommendation itself. So you're within a few clicks drilling right to the recommendation, being able to identify which are completed, which are in progress. And then from here, you would identify recommendation 27, for example, which is a completed recommendation. The final component of this dashboard would allow you to select that recommendation, where you would simply scroll to recommendation number 27. It'll provide you with the details of that recommendation. It relates, this is essentially a summary of each recommendation that says which theme does this relate to, which unit or responsible part of the organization has carriage of this recommendation, the target due date. Are there related recommendations? In this case, there's one, recommendation 24. And then finally, where there's a related document or a related policy, or potentially, as we move forward, we fully expect that this will integrate with the reporting conducted by different city services and different partners as we engage in a lot of this work. So you'd be able to, for this example, I won't bring us there at this moment, but you would click on this and it would literally bring you to the document that pertains to this recommendation. And so in summary, we also have an information page which provides a lot of the information about the intent of this dashboard and the intended audience and some of the important links. It's like an overview of why we have this. It has a legend at the end so we can recognize very quickly what some of the indicators refer to and the difference between completed and in progress. And finally, and this is important, I think, we've provided an opportunity for anyone who has comments about the functionality or the content to be able to report those in the same way that any user of the public safety data portal would be able to do so. And we'll be able to take that feedback into consideration and review on an ongoing basis ways to enhance the usability of this platform. It is meant to be something that we continuously update, and we absolutely want feedback from the community about its usefulness and practicality. And as Ryan mentioned, once we start to have indicators, KPIs around each of these that speak to the goals and the outcomes, we will be incorporating those as well. And so that is our summary at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Doobie, could you put on the deputant now, please?
Yes. Just 1 second. Eric Moran, can you hear us?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. This is notice that orders signed by Premier Ford are not part of the public domain, and that I direct the Toronto Police Services to put links to them on their new dashboard. On the link to this dashboard, it says, concrete steps to improve trust with our communities. The dashboard provides links to relevant public reports as soon as they are available. While following up on a question that was initially asked of Chief Pegg, I recently heard Deputy Chief Demke made the following comment, enforcing the orders. While Mayor Tory was on the rush recently talking about protesters who will be holding a Santa Claus parade planned by Chris Sky in December, by the way, I'm sure you're all invited. Mayor Tory spoke of them as flouting the law by not following health orders. So it is my wish that links be provided on this new dashboard to the orders that Premier Ford and Mayor Tory want the Toronto Police to enforce. But not a link that just shows what these orders say, but links to signed copies of these orders that actually show Premier Ford and the Lieutenant Governor's signatures on them. Recently, I heard Premier Ford talking about COVID protesters, and he assured everybody that there is no agenda, as in there is no government agenda. I have also heard Premier Ford a number of times throughout this fake pandemic mention about the public domain. Take notice what the Supreme Court of Canada had to say in regards to the public's right to know the law and to understand its application. This is from Dean versus British Columbia. It must be understood as an ensemble of practices and principles that are called upon in various contexts to serve our society's democratic ideals, one of which being the public's right to know the law and to understand its application. No, it's not part of the public domain that's generally known to the public. These orders I keep hearing about signed by Premier Ford, because if we have the right to know the law, then it stands to reason we also have the right to see the law. In this case, to see these orders and to see if they've actually been signed by Premier Ford and the Lieutenant Governor. And if there is no government agenda, as he claims, then Premier Ford should have no problem making the orders he has signed available for the public to view for themselves and that have his signature on them. Take notice what the Federal Court of Appeal had to say in regards to specific information being in the public domain. Canada versus Merck Frost Canada, Federal Court of Appeal, and Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce versus Canada, 2007, Federal Court of Appeal. Justice Pelletier, writing for the court, emphasized the importance of checking whether the specific information is in the public domain. These orders signed by Premier Ford, not in the public domain. Take notice what the Ontario Superior Court said the definition for public domain is. This is from L. Baquet versus Palmer, 2018. In the Dictionary of Canadian Law, public domain is defined as the sphere in which the public operates. Something is in the public domain if it is generally known to the public. These orders supposedly signed by Premier Ford are not generally known to the public. Nobody's ever actually seen them. Take notice what the Ontario Court of Appeal had to say in regards to the public's right to know. Central Auto Parts versus Barclay. As in Webb versus Waterloo Regional Police Services Board, standard police media practices and policies and the public's right to know have to be considered. So obviously I have the right to know. So I have a question then, saying that. I just want to know, has Chief Raymer ever actually seen these orders that have been supposedly signed by Premier Ford that Premier Ford wants the Toronto Police to enforce?
Derek, keep going.
No, I'm done actually.
Okay. Thank you very much, Derek. Any questions of the deputant?
What about my question though?
I'll get there, Derek. Don't worry. Any questions of the deputant? Seeing none. Chief Raymer, did you want to speak to what Derek just said?
Yes, Chair. We routinely get, virtually every day, we get memos from the provincial government outlining all the changes and what the rules of the rules of engagement are in terms of the legislation, and we are regularly updated, and we keep the service updated as a result of those the memos we receive.
Thanks very much, Chief. Any other questions of the deputant?
That doesn't answer my question.
Thank you very much, Derek. We'll now bring this item into the board. Any questions of the service? Board members?
Vice Chair Molyneux has a question of Mr.
Go right ahead, Vice Chair.
Can you hear me clearly?
You're breaking up a little bit, but I think we can understand what you're saying. Go ahead.
My question is it possible to relate the prior agenda item where we talked about the community engagement response to this dashboard? How, if so, how would that happen and how would I find it eventually? Thank you.
I can speak to that. We have in here one of the themes regarding consultation with experts and communities.
I just don't understand.
Sorry, are you able to hear me?
I can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to continue. So we do have in here one of the themes as the consultation with experts and communities area, which has a number of the items that have been recommended at the board with the board agenda items. So I think, Marie, that's one of the areas that I'd be happy to show you is very specifically how to walk through that. But I think those are ideal updates that we would have within the dashboard. And if they're not there presently, those are updates that we can either add or make sure that they're included moving forward.
Thank you.
Board members, any further questions? Seeing none. I just want to thank you for all the work that you've put into this. Transparency is one of the most important things that we do in government, and this is going to help us go a long way to show the public the work that we're doing each and every step, each and every day, week, month, and year as we go forward. So thank you so much for all the work that you've done. I'll now bring this into the board. Can I have a motion to receive the presentation on item number 3? Councilor Nunziata, can I have a seconder? Meritori, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, item number 3 carries. Thank you very much. Item number 4 is the status of the Auditor General's proposed risk-based audit plan for the Toronto Police Service. And we have a deputant. Doobie, can you put on the deputant, please?
Yes. Derek, can you hear us?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. So in this report, it mentions a number of the specific units of the Toronto Police that the Auditor General has reviewed. One that wasn't mentioned, as it's a relatively new one that I wish for her to review on the basis of whether or not what they're doing is actually lawful, is what I believe is being referred to as the social gathering unit. Now, I put a couple memes there about things that she's had to say at audit committee. As an auditor, you know, you have to trust, but you have to verify. And the last one is she mentioned, my first statement is always be clear on the law. So I just want to be clear on the law in regards to what is expected of this social gathering unit of the Toronto Police. So I have there a regulation that's found in behind the Reopening Ontario Act. What this rule actually says is no person shall attend a social gathering held at the place of more than 1, 10 people if the gathering is held indoors, or 2, 25 people if the gathering is held outdoors. Now, you know, Chair Hart, I emailed you that, letting you know I wanted to speak on this issue pretty badly. I sent you part of that email was, hi, Chair Hart. So Chief Peg here says in this clip, and I provide the YouTube clip, Chief Peg says, I remind everyone that the limits on gatherings are no more than 10 people indoors and no more than 25 people outdoors. Really? Where does it say that? Okay, so you all know now that's not true. It clearly says no person shall attend. You all now know that what Chief Pegg and Premier Ford, to be fair, has been saying is not true, and that they've just been spreading misinformation. You may have noticed there is no definition for person provided in the regulation nor the act. So from there, you have to go find the definition for person from the Ontario Legislation Act, which is person includes a corporation. Of course, includes is a tricky word, which the Ontario Attorney General, I've gone over this case law before. I'm not going to go through the whole thing again. But the Ontario Attorney General has explained that in court that includes can also mean means. So that really says person means a corporation. Take notice what the Ontario Court of Appeal had to say in regards to the doctrine of implied invitation regarding police trying to enter someone's home. This is from R versus Tricker. However, the license ends at the door to the house and may be revoked by directing the person on the property to leave. The law is clear that the occupier of a dwelling gives implied license to any member of the public, including a police officer, on legitimate business to come onto the property. Such implied license can be rebutted by express refusal of it, as in this case, the Robsons could no doubt have rebutted the implied license to the police officers by putting up a notice on their front gate. No admittance to police officers, but that was not done in this case. Take notice what the British Columbia Court of Appeal had to say in regards to the right of free movement. It's from Buhlers versus British Columbia. The particular function of liberty in the trilogy of life, liberty, and security of the person touches on the right of free movement. Take notice what the Ontario Court of Appeal had to say in regards to everyone having a common law right to liberty. This happens to be from Figueres versus the Toronto Police Services Board, 2015. Quite apart from Section 7 of the Charter, everyone has a common law right to liberty. The liberty interfered with was not a qualified liberty like the right to drive, but rather the fundamental right to move about in the community. The common law liberty infringed here was the right to circulate freely in the community. Take notice of the maxim of law that an affirmative statute does not take away from the common law. Take notice what the Supreme Court of Canada had to say in regards to common law rights not being abrogated. Pioneer Corporation versus Godfrey. Turning to Toshiba's, I won't go through all that extra stuff, but they mention in this case specifically the presumption that Parliament does not intend to abrogate common law rights. Take notice what the Supreme Court had to say in regards to the freedom of association. Dunmore versus Ontario Attorney General, 2001. In the Alberta reference, Chief Justice Dixon elaborated on the role of freedom of association as follows. Freedom of association is the freedom to combine together for the pursuit of common purposes on the advancement of common causes. It is one of the fundamental freedoms guaranteed by the Charter of any free and democratic society, protecting individuals from the vulnerability of isolation and ensuring the potential of effective participation in society.
Thank you, Derek. You're over your time, so I have to stop you there, but thank you very much. Board members, any questions of Derek? Seeing none, thank you very much for your deputation, and we also received your written submission and have circulated that on items 3, 4, and 5. Thank you, Derek. Now take this item into the board. Any questions on the report of the Auditor General or anyone else, board members? Any questions? I don't see any questions. Auditor General, are you on the phone? I have one question for you if you're there.
Mr. Chair, it's Ryan. I think Councillor Ford had a question.
Okay, Councillor Ford, you go first, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry, and this is to the Auditor General? This isn't to the deputy,
yes, it is.
Right? Okay, sorry. Thank you.
No, that's correct.
Okay, just a couple questions to the Auditor General. Madam Auditor General, sitting on the audit committee, I know a lot of the great work you do and phenomenal reports you bring to the committee, which ends up at City Council. in the work plan, you've identified a number of areas you want to look at. I'm just curious on how you landed on those areas.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So we use the same criteria that other Auditor Generals use. There's 7 factors that are outlined within the report. We conduct extensive consultations at all levels, so we would include the Toronto Police Association. We would include all of the chief, the chair, the deputies. We consider public consultations. We consider the work and minutes of this board. We consider extensive research. We evaluate all of that information against the criteria that are set by, other Auditor Generals, and it would be things like the size of the item as far as dollars goes, the risks of not achieving the objectives to be able to provide assurance to the board, those kinds of things, and then we settle on the item. And you'll notice I have an emerging item, even though we haven't not completed our risk assessment yet. There is an item that is bubbling to the top, and we would like to include it in our work plan. And it's in relation to 911 and how those calls are dealt with. And the reason I included that one, for instance, is because I fortunately have the purview across not only police, but fire and paramedic. And so it's a good chance to look across the city as one city to say, how are we as a city responding? And if there's a better way to do it, those monies can be used for other purposes. So that would be one area. It's the area where policing starts, for example. And, it might identify areas where proactive policing can occur. So, and also how you respond to and who responds to certain calls. So in our consultation on that specific issue, I can say there was a lot of consensus that that was an important area for everybody that we've talked to. So that is why that one is bubbling up. And I think it's an area that we can move forward and bring people all on the same page and really provide some transparency and opportunities. So
excellent.
Hopefully
no, that does. And then one further question, kind of split into two. When would the board be expecting a report from you? And the second part to that question is, what will the reporting, relationship look like? Will you be putting a report to the board or a presentation and to audit committee?
So let me answer your second question first. Always to the board first. No surprises. We work, when you spoke about, the team, really the team is more than my team. It's the group within the service that we work with, the management that we work with, the group we're auditing, and the board. And so we bring it back to management first and make sure there's no surprises and get their input all the way along. And then we bring it to the board. And then really it's the board I take direction from. It is provided then to refer it on to audit committee, but it's referred from the board to audit committee, so that, you refer it on. In relation to timing, I know the urgency around, funding, of course, but as auditors, we take a very methodical, measured look and really work as quickly as we can, and a lot of that depends on cooperation, and we're getting cooperation with Chief Raymer for sure, but it takes the time it takes to get the right answer so that you're not, so that the right solid steps are taken after that. So we expect if we can start like early in the new year and include it in our 2021 work plan, we're hoping to have results, 9 months to 12 months, from there. And these are major areas, and it could have a different audits, from different organizations. So we're hoping that that is when we have our results. However, if there's an opportunity to provide feedback and results earlier within the process, we communicate those right to the service, and change can get underway right away. So we don't wait until the very end. So, it's hard to give a definite time frame because it is a big area, but usually an audit is 9 months. 3 or 4 months of planning, 3 months of work, and then reporting and change and consultation all the way out. So that's usually our I always, always say it's like having a baby. It takes 9 months to make it and get it delivered. So.
Excellent. That's a great way to end off. Thank you.
Councilor Nunziata.
Thank you. So to the auditor, so reading your report, you're going to present your 2021 audit work plan at the November 19th audit committee, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Thank you.
And then, but then it says that you will report to the Toronto Police Services Board on their November 24, 2020 meeting, a memorandum of understanding. So you'll be coming to the board on November 24th?
Yes, if you, let me clarify. My recommendation is in relation to just this emerging issue to include it in our plan right now for the next cycle so we can get underway right now. We will be also bringing a memorandum of understanding as requested by the board. We expect to have that for the November meeting, if not the December meeting, so that everybody's on the same page in relation to how I will consult and conduct my work. For me to have the full plan for the board in relation to the list of audits that I think are most important to the board, that will come in your November meeting. Because audit committee is meeting before that, I definitely want to make sure we get this one started and underway, but the full list of the audits that will follow in a timed fashion after that will be given to the board for consideration on the 24th, but I first make sure that we walk her through with the chief and his staff, so it takes a bit of time to make sure we get all that done first.
Okay, thank you. Because I know we have an audit committee meeting tomorrow, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so on page 6 of 7, the reports, the previous reports of the audit on Toronto Police Service going back to 1999, 2011, you indicate that as of today, there are no outstanding recommendations, that they've all been complete, correct?
That is correct.
But you also say that given some of these audits occurred several years ago, that it is possible that risk and practices have changed over time, and we are still considering the above areas as part of our risk assessment process, correct?
That is correct. Correct.
Okay, okay. Because it has been a few years since we've since the last audit, so things have changed since
yes. So what we do is when we prioritize an area, we will look at any research, any work done in that area for 2 reasons. One, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So if something's been recommended, we'll see if it's in place and if it's still relevant. And number 2, if it's a priority, we're going to look at it anyway. So we really just make sure that we're not going to duplicate anything, but if it's an important recommendation and it's an area that we're looking at, we'll make sure that recommendation is still working effectively.
Okay, thank you.
Board members, any other questions? I can't see all of you, so if you have any, please speak up. Seeing none, Auditor General, I just have one question, and it's around risk assessments and how you get there. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Is it a standard methodology? That's my understanding, that any Auditor General would take kind of the same approach as well as any lead of any audit group. Would that be correct?
I would say any Auditor General. I don't know what the other auditors do in relation to private firms, but certainly for Auditor Generals, this is the approach. And I've worked in but 4 audit offices, and our the detail that we put into our work to make sure that we are hitting the right area, that you're getting the best bang for the buck in relation to our services, is very detailed. But yes, it's what other Auditor Generals use, and we have a very methodical approach, and we use the same approach across the entire city.
Okay, terrific. Just a follow-up question then. The service itself, since you haven't done an assessment yet of the service, and this is all new to us, the service has been doing this all along. Given that you're going to start doing a risk-based assessment, Does it make the services risk-based assessment now redundant and we can apply those resources that are involved in that, because that's a lot of work to do other things or to follow up on the work that you do? I'm just wondering how it makes sense for two of these to happen.
Thank you. Your due diligence around having your risk-based assessment, around having an enterprise-wide risk management framework is important to have in place. My risk assessment is focused on which projects I will do first. And so it's a different information. We do factor in your enterprise-wide risk management and any risk assessment and any prior work that's been done. And that will affect whether we go into an area or not. If it's been covered and we feel confident about that area, we might not do it, and we might prioritize something else. So we do factor it in, and we do provide the results of our assessment back for the board to consider as it moves forward. So any areas that we think are risky, or maybe there's better opportunities, but we haven't been able to get it there from an audit perspective, or it's going to take us too long, that information comes back to the board for incorporation into its risk assessment.
What did you say?
So both entities should continue that work. Is that what you're saying, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. I'll now bring this item into the board. Can I have a motion to receive? Does anybody wish to speak to this item, first of all, before we go there? No? Can I have a motion to receive this item? Councillor Ford, a seconder. Tori, all in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. We'll now move forward to item number 5, which is the chief, and thank you, Auditor General, for calling in. Really appreciate it. Moving on to item number 5, Chief of Police Selection Process, Contract Award to Environics to deliver public consultation services. We have a deputation on that item. Doobie, can you put on the deputant, please?
Yes. Derek, can you hear us?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied. In doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. And let the record show, as person is defined as a corporation in the Legislation Act of Ontario. If I have ever led the Toronto Police Services and or this board to believe in any way that I am the person, then that would be a mistake, and that I ask all of you to please forgive me. Before I speak about the next chief, I want to speak about the current chief, even though he didn't answer my question 2 items ago. I want to commend Chief Raymer and his officers for making sure our common law right to liberty and our freedom of association was upheld 2 weeks ago at the Yonge Dundas Square march put on by the Line and Chris Sky, who are speaking out about how this fake pandemic is being used to trample our rights and freedoms over a virus that even long-term care minister Marilee Fullerton recently referred to as being basically comparable to a bad flu year. Let the record show that I do not consent to this item, as it is not in the public's interest to let the corporation of the City of Toronto, operating as John Tory, waste another $75,000 of the public's money when there is a perfectly good candidate now who could be rubber stamped at today's meeting and just get it over with. Whereas the definition in the Canadian Oxford Dictionary for deputation reads as a group of people appointed to represent others, usually for a specific purpose, a delegation. Whereas the Court of Queen's Bench for Saskatchewan in 1999 said in Loch-Orange Indian Band versus Canada, within itself, the word depute contains the notion of superior and inferior. The former possesses authority, but passes it on or shares it with the latter. In each instance, it is necessary to ascertain what authority was conveyed to the deputy. So I wish to make an actual deputation. I appoint the Toronto Police Services Board to act as the trustee for me in this matter, with instructions directing them to appoint Deputy Chief Shauna Coxon as the next chief of the Toronto Police Services. Take notice in the regulations of the Police Services Act, the last line in the oath of office a police officer takes says, "So help me God." As you'll notice in my written submission, Chair Hart, a couple of years ago, I noticed a tweet on Twitter from Deputy Chief Coxon. It reads, "Very blessed to spend this morning at St. Michael's Cathedral for the Emergency Services Mass. An inspiring sermon on getting to the heart of our lives through loving God and people. So not only does she know that the crown is the surety for the person we all have, I'm sure that she'll also respect Romans 2:11, for there is no respect of persons with God. Also in Regina versus Rostad, 1971, Ontario Superior Court mentioned that the law is no respecter of persons. And Genesis 1:26, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. And again, like I said last month, those 3 court cases that said sovereignty is ultimately remains in the people. It goes along with Genesis 1:26. So I'll just wait and, sit back and listen while you guys make some motion, I guess, to just get this over with and make Deputy Chief Shauna Coxon the next chief of the Toronto Police. And that's it.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thank you very much, and also thank you for your written submission. I'll now bring this item into the board. Members of the board, any questions on this item? Councillor Ford, go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I probably should have asked this prior to the board meeting, but do we have any representatives from the search firm here, or is it questions to our staff?
It's
Pardon me?
We don't have any representatives from.
No problem. So I guess 2 questions I have. One, it does say so that the contract total for the search firm, and then it goes by, if we extend month by month basis, what does that work out to be?
Councillor, for your question. So the upper limit for the RFP that was put out was $75,000, and so the contract that, if the board approves this report, would be awarded would not exceed that amount. If during the process the board were to decide that it wanted, for whatever reason, to add on to the services that were provided, that would have to be negotiated and paid for separately.
Okay, awesome. And then my second question, which would have been to the firm, but I'm sure Mr. Teschner, you can answer this. In selecting this firm, I assume we looked at their experience in the area of policing. Would you be able to just expand on some of their work and their insight to looking for a chief of police in a city such as Toronto?
Yes, so you're quite right. We had quite a robust RFP process in the sense that the RFP was out for anybody to bid on. Obviously, this firm was one of the bidders. It went through the proper vetting process. There was a selection committee, and the report speaks to the members, including a member from the City of Toronto, to provide that experience. The firm that's being recommended today has cross-Canada experience with various forms of public engagement and consultation in the unionized environment, in public sector organizations that span the diverse range of service types. The report highlights some of the more recent experiences that they've had, including consultations on the Trans-Canada Pipeline, a Presto data privacy consultation, one to do with opioid use. So again, some of these urban issues that you're speaking of that certainly impact on policing. And most recently, they've done one in Durham regarding anti-Black racism, and they held a robust public consultation there. So the idea here was to look for a firm that would be able to engage the cross-section of stakeholders, members of the public, across communities in a city like Toronto, as opposed to a consultation focused solely and only on selecting a chief of police. And so after looking at all of their work, their track record, their team, and the approach that they put forward, they came forward. In addition, though, I can say that there's obviously going to be a second piece to this puzzle, which is an executive search firm. And the intent is for a recommendation on the proposed vendor to come forward to the board next month on that. And certainly one of the things that we have asked vendors to speak about, or proposed vendors to speak about there, is their expertise in recruitment with respect to police organizations and chiefs of police.
Right, and that was given much more appropriately with the search firm. So, all right, thank you.
Board members, any further questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve this item?
I wanted to speak if I could.
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry, my meritorious to speak.
Sorry, Chair. I didn't. I suppose I could have put it as a question, but I noticed in reading through the report that there were all kinds of, sessions and town, what do you call it, roundtable meetings and whatnot, and with groups, and they were groups that were to some extent representative of the population. But I noticed there wasn't any element of, for example, even online. And I realize online surveys or repositories of information have their frailties in terms of people manipulating them and so on. But I just wondered if you'd had any chance to discuss with them. And again, I'm back like Councillor Ford was, where I would have asked this question of them. And by the way, they're a very reputable firm. I certainly have. I think they're, from a competitive process, you've got a good choice out of this that's got a good reputation. But I just wondered if we'd had any discussion with them about a broader mechanism that could be simple and relatively cost-free of doing something online to measure, and maybe we could just raise it with them, measure a broader public input or thoughts about the chief's new chief's attributes and whatnot.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thanks for the question. We did have that conversation during both the proposal and presentation phase. So two pieces to respond. One, all of the firms that put forward bids obviously recognize that we're in the midst of a pandemic, and the ability to host in-person gatherings is limited, if not restricted. And so all of them spoke to the way that they would leverage technology and an online presence, whether that's live virtual sessions, whether that's surveys or other forms of engagement, in order to get at the information that we're getting at. Environics also spoke about the need to leverage that online presence in order to actually more effectively engage some of the participants that typically would not necessarily show up to a session, whether those are virtual or in person. So that is both part of the proposal they put forward, and certainly if the board approves, the recommendation would be part of the onboarding discussion we would have.
So in that regard then, Chair, now we're into more of what I should have done. I apologize in the question period, but I just thought I would say it in my remarks. I would likely then move a motion, and I can put it very simply, and I can actually email it to you if you want. It's very short. Just to ask Environics to include in their work plan the ability of individual members of the public to register their thoughts online. And so that way it's not one of these groups, and I hear everything you've said about how we can't have big town hall meetings, and nor do I think those would necessarily be very constructive, even in non-pandemic times. But I do think having some, I'll call it a portal, but just some place where people could register their views in an organized way, knowing that those are frail in terms of people manipulating them, would be a good thing. So I'll send you, who do I send the a motion to, just saying that they be asked to consider that?
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, I'll just direct you to the extent that your question might be addressed in the report already. On page 5, in the second full paragraph at the top of the page, it reads, Environics will also facilitate an open session for service members and will employ an online tool to collect and analyze written and online submissions. I believe that is what you're aimed at. I think what you're saying is, let's make sure that that's both for service members, but the broader public. And that's certainly part of the discussion we will have with them.
That's exactly my point. And I saw this language here, but it didn't specifically. It made reference to all these other groups, but not so much to the broad public. But I think if you can just maybe take it as noted and it'll go in the minutes or something, I'm happy with that.
Yes, we will.
Great. Okay, terrific. We'll do that. Members, any other questions? Any speakers? Anybody wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring this in to the board. Can I have a motion to approve, please? Ms. Kostakis, seconder. Meritori, all in favor? Any opposed? That item is carried. I will move forward to item number 6. I believe the Vice Chair has an overall question on items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So I'll propose that the Vice Chair ask her question, the service answer that, and then we'll go through each one of the items to see if members have questions or wish to speak on them. So Vice Chair, you had a question, I think, overall on all of the technology reports. So if you wanted to close that now, then we'll go through each of the items.
Thank you very much, Chair Hart. Yes, in fact, the 5 items are all related, from what I can tell, to technology investments. And my question to the chief, who may wish to delegate it, is how do we know as board members that all of these technology investments are ultimately going to achieve the objective we discussed during the body-worn camera discussion, which is savings that allow us to be more efficient? This is a lot of money. I didn't do the math because there's multi-year investments, so I didn't want to get it wrong. But it would be good to understand the big picture, how these investments fit into the big picture IT strategy, and how we will know and when we will know that the ones where savings are possible are going to affect those savings, and when can we expect to hear more about that? Thank you.
Okay, Chair, I've asked our CIO, Colin Stairs, to provide a more thorough response to that question. Go ahead, Colin.
Thank you, sir. The elements that you're seeing coming forward to this board session are sort of at the vanguard of a number of changes. Some of these, there's items 9, 10, 11, 9, 10, 8, 9, 10, 11, sorry, are all connected to the devices in the cars and how those have aged out and are causing issues. Some of these issues, like the global search, are the beginning of IT rationalization. So let me back up and say, as a broad approach, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the benefits that the organization is trying to drive along the themes of lightening up the administrative burden, improving the flow of information through the service, giving platforms that will allow us to engage the community as per the first hour of the board meeting today. As well as just straight process improvement and streamlining, and finally the theme of supporting our frontline. So under those themes, we've built a program or a set of programs on our strategy that are going to drive a series of changes. The first of those is digital officers, so enabling our officers to get away from paper-based or hybrid data gathering methods. Body-worn cameras is part of that, e-memo books is part of that, and a lot of the infrastructure that you're seeing here in the mobile workstations in the cars is part of that as well. The second is IT rationalization. So the global search is part of an effort, again, it's sort of the vanguard of looking at how we can rationalize our systems and consolidate them down. The next is platform and transformation. So that's how we're going to address our community and also how we're going to streamline processes internally. We're going to look at parking automation, cloud-based human capital management, and also records management systems. And those are a little behind. We talked about having the resources to be able to address those issues and being able to create that space. So in terms of those activities, what we're trying to do is create the space that we can use to then invest in these technologies. So of course, we're very focused on what the return on any investment we make would be. If we take the first example, the global search, what I'm looking at there is decommissioning 2 legacy records management solutions as part of the IT rationalization. To do that, I need to be able to continue to access the data that's in those, and that's what the global search tool will allow me to do. So I've expanded the scope of the global search project in order to achieve that and then be able to take the money out of the decommissioning of the 2 other applications. The timeline for that is tied into our IBM contract and being able to manage that IBM contract and the licensing that we have, but we're going to get people back almost immediately that I can then put to work working on the other areas, particularly the platform and the digital officer. So that's where that's going to come in. The Adobe contract, we are using just more and more technology in the service, and that's growing in a, I wouldn't say uncontrolled method, but it's not growing in a strategic method. So Adobe, mostly we're using it for forms management, and we've got to look at more advanced digital forms management solutions. So I've initiated a project to look at that question. Further, the Scout cars, we are having operational impacts of failures of our devices, mobile workstations, our connectivity, those are causing officers to be taken offline. So that's an immediate concern, and I've got to go full throttle on repairing those so that we don't have officers being taken off the streets. That's sort of the picture right now. So we're going to continue to look at the rationalization, and out of that is going to come a number of savings. Those are going to be on the order of 1 to 2 million, 3 million size of savings, because I'm working off of a $50 million base in a constrained environment, and we are continuing to consume and plan to consume more technology. Where the big wins are going to come are going to be in the parking automation, estimates around 20 to 30 million there. In the platform and transformation, looking at what the Auditor General was speaking to in terms of 911 and call diversion, there's somewhere between 7 and 15 million there. And also in terms of the digital officer, getting rid of paper memo books, allowing those processes to stream electronically right from the source. That's albeit soft saving, but it's in the $80 to $100 million range of labor saved. Now, the challenge is going to be, I think, as the mayor pointed out on a previous call, that extracting those dollars is difficult, and it requires effort across the service, because we're talking about redeploying resources based on the gains that we get in efficiency. That's going to take time. I believe I'm set to come to the December board meeting with a broader plan, and I'll speak to that at that time. We're still doing a lot of analysis, and I have limited resources to do that analysis.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So my second question, which you may have answered, is when will we see the big picture plan? I believe you just said that that will come forward at the December meeting. So if that's the answer, then I'll take that. Thank you very much. That was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any questions on the broader strategy before we go through each of the items, or would you prefer we go through each of the items? Any questions on the broad strategy? No, hearing none. Okay, we will return to the agenda. So we're on item number 6, which is Global Search Solution Project, contract increases for additional licensing and professional services, Michael Sismer and Associates. Any questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve item number 6? Motion to approve. Ms. Kostakis, seconded by Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, item number 6 is carried. Item number 7 is contract award for Adobe software maintenance and support, Soft Choice Canada Incorporated. Any questions? Seeing none, could I have a motion to approve? Motion to approve. Someone, I need a motion to approve item number 7. Mayor Tory, seconder, Ms. Kostakis, all in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, item number 7 carries. Item number 8, contract award for the supply of Panasonic CF33 ruggedized mobile workstations, associated accessories and maintenance, Soft Choice Canada Incorporated. A motion to approve item number 8. Motion to approve. Ms. Kostakis, the seconder. Councilor Nunziata, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, item number 8 carries. Item number 9 is contract award for integrated telecommunication infrastructure with Bell Canada. Any questions on that item? Councilor Nunziata, you have a question?
Yes, I just have a question. Being that we're going to piggyback with the city on the existing City of Toronto agreement, is there a savings on that as well?
I believe there is in terms of scale, but I think we're actually pretty much break even on that. Most of the benefits are coming from increased functionality and capability of those units.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Can I have a motion to approve item number 9? Councilor Nunziata, a seconder. Mayor Tory, all in favor? Any opposed? Item number 9 carries. Item number 10, contract award for the supply of vehicle equipment installation services Kerr Industries Limited. Any questions? And I have a motion to approve. Motion to approve, Ms. Kostakis, seconder. Mr. Morgan and Vice Chair, I can't see either of you, so if you're raising your hand, you'll have to speak up. Councilor Nunziata seconded that. All in favor? Any opposed? Item number 10 carries. Item number 11, contract award to supply Havas mounting equipment for vehicle electronic systems, Mega Technical Holdings Limited. Item number 11, any questions of the service? Seeing no questions, can I have a motion to approve item number 11? Motion to approve. Ms. Kostakis, thank you. A seconder? Seconder? Councilor Ford, I can't see you either, so I'm not sure if you're raising your hand.
So moved.
I need a seconder still. Councilor Ford, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Item number 11 carries. Now we move forward to item number 15, which is the Toronto Police Service Board's race-based data collection analysis and public reporting policy community report. And I believe there's a presentation on 15 and 16 combined. And item number 16 is the Toronto Police Service Board's Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit progress update on the unit's work. So I will turn this over to the Chief for a presentation on 15 and 16, and then we will go back to 15 for questions of the service. Go right ahead, Chief.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Over to you, Barb.
No. We good? Good morning, Deputy Peter Ewan here. Good morning, members of the board. I had the pleasure of being assigned to be the community engagement lead on this important policy that we're undertaking. Before the team present you with a very, I looked at it very well-informed presentation. I just want to say this, as the lead of this important file, anytime we have a conversation with the community about this issue, it was a very difficult conversation. And we did very well. We met with over 800 members in 4 town hall meetings, a large number of community focus groups. So we met in 12 divisions, 14 divisions, 42 divisions, and 51 divisions. It was excellent engagement, and we heard a lot of input. And I can say to the board that the community has cautiously given us some permission to start with this policy. Having said that, we have also promised that we will report back to them with the board's oversight, and many of the recommendations, many of the suggestions are included in today's presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Roseanne Bailey and the team to present this presentation to the members of the board, and we'll take some questions after. I'm sure you have questions of us.
Thank you very much, Deputy Ewan. The community engagement represents an integral part of the race-based data strategy. You'll hear a little bit more information about the broader strategy in the next presentation that the Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights team will be presenting. So over the period of October the 19th to October 2019 to February 2020, the service engaged in the largest community engagement to date to raise awareness around the race-based data collection strategy and to also update the public and get feedback around the implementation process. For that, we employed a multi-pronged approach and engaged geographically as well as demographically diverse voices across the city. You'll see that on the left-hand side, we have engaged with 30 community organizations. They've conducted 51 focus groups, and there were 8 community liaison committee as well as the community consultative committees meetings that we engaged in, as well as additional 4 town halls that were actually conducted by the team. On the right-hand side, you'll actually see a geographic spread of the communities that we engaged with. So we had a very diverse group that we had asked for feedback around the race-based data collection. You'll see on screen the demographics from our immigration status, the gender identities, race, as well as age. As wide as this was, and this is one of our largest community engagement strategy, we recognize that there were also limitations. With this report, you'll also emphasize that the key limitation that we had was we weren't able to actually engage or include perspective of a larger Indigenous engaged strategies within the Indigenous people. So for given information or providing information and perspective from Indigenous communities, we're embarking on a larger strategy that will actually look at dedicating our resources to allowing this community to actually have an opportunity to provide strategies as well as hear their voices. And then another engagement report will actually be provided with the incorporation of that as well.
A range of key themes emerged from the engagement Roseanne mentioned, and they are presented in more detail into a report, which is nicely designed and will be posted on the RBDC Strategies website right after this meeting. I will just go quickly through some of the key findings. Reconciliation and trust. Community members ask the service to acknowledge its mistakes and harm caused. They see it as an act of humility, which validates their experiences and an important step to reconcile with certain communities. Participants also ask to be engaged throughout the entire process of the RBDC strategy implementation. Some members also question the need for collecting new data without taking action because they felt that racism in policing was sufficiently documented in several high-profile reports. Some participants also expressed concerns about the service will not be using the data in good faith. Despite skepticism and concerns, many participants regarded the RBDC strategy as an opportunity to hold the service accountable and also to support the officers to better interact with diverse communities. Focus groups especially provided the space for more in-depth conversations around ways of data collection. And around self-identification data was, on one hand, was seen as being more accurate as people have the opportunity to identify themselves instead of being labeled by others. But on the other hand, many participants expressed reluctance to provide this kind of information. And the focus groups also provided the opportunity for in-depth conversations around factors that might be influencing people's decisions to share or not share that information. Some of them being the reason behind the officer's request, and also how that information is relevant for that particular type of interaction. People also expressed that they would feel more comfortable to provide that information to a neighborhood community officer. And also the timing of the request is also critical. And you can see in the graph on the bottom right that most of the participants prefer to be asked this information at the end or after the interaction. Hearing from diverse communities and sharing back what was heard represents only the first step moving forward. The service is committed to take action, be transparent and accountable on what it heard, and take very concrete actions. And the last section of the report articulates very specific commitments. Just very quickly, in the interest of time, some of these actions are to develop better relationships with diverse communities and also develop robust data management practices. Examples being developing a public awareness campaign to clearly communicate scope, relevance, and progress under the strategy. As Roseanne mentioned before, a dedicated Indigenous engagement in collaboration with Indigenous groups to have the meaningful engagement and input in the strategy from Indigenous peoples. Also, we are in the process of developing, rolling out, and evaluate later on a pilot to collect self-identification data, and working with the Private Information and Privacy Commissioner and other key stakeholders with expertise in data protection to develop robust data privacy protection protocols. So throughout the process of implementing these actions, the service is committed to continue meaningfully engage with diverse communities. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. First of all, I'd actually like to thank the community members for providing the input for our community engagement report. This report actually is a promise back to those who provided this input that we would be very open and transparent with what they told us. And in fact, later on today, a press release will be going out about this report, communicating it to the public that it in fact is ready to go out. Also part of this presentation, which is actually very timely, is a report on our Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit. I can speak very strongly that our capacity for equity, inclusion, and human rights is a priority for this service, and you're actually now going to hear about what we are doing and what we have been doing to build this capacity. Just as a brief recap, you will recall that the vision for a rebranded Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit with its structure and a prioritized staffing of critical positions were presented and approved at the May 2019 board meeting. Since that time, the service has been building a center of excellence that is the first of its kind in Canadian policing. The EI and HR unit, as it is known, was actually born out of the work of the Transformational Task Force and the vision of a community-centric police service. That was described within the way forward. Today, as the unit plays a vital role in the service's modernization through its work in building capacity for equity, inclusion, and human rights. This work is a cornerstone of the 2020-23 People Plan that we presented to the board last month. EI and HR is driving a range of initiatives that will ultimately create long-lasting positive changes within the service, as well as within its relationship with members of the public. And while the board might be aware of the unit's work through various reports and initiatives, this report and presentation actually provides board members with a more complete look at the contributions the unit has been making toward a progressive equity agenda for the Toronto Police Service. So without any further ado, I will now turn the presentation over to Sue Lynn Knight, who is our manager of the Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Toronto Police Service Board for the opportunity to talk about the work of the unit. I also want to highlight that this is the anniversary week of the hiring of the team since the May 2019 board report went in for approval for the structure for the EIHR unit. And so what we have here is a center of excellence guided by an effective team of subject matter experts to support a progressive equity and human rights agenda through the way forward, and also to deliver on several high-profile initiatives for the service. You will see here, as Deputy McLean mentioned, from 2016, how the TPS invested in the way forward, the modernization plan, and then a timeline as to where we got to with the unit. The vision, which is key, again, is to have a service that's comprised of members who reflect the rich diversity of Toronto, who are recognized and encouraged to maintain and contribute through their unique experiences, abilities, perspectives within a respectful and inclusive environment that enables us to better serve residents and communities within the City of Toronto. When we talk about a center of excellence, what's key to this and central are the pillars of what creates a center of excellence for equity, inclusion, and human rights. These principles are based in community engagement, making sure that the community's voices are heard and reflected in the work that we do, making sure that we're analyzing policies through a human rights and equity lens, making sure that we're building the right partnerships externally and internally within the organization to make sure that this work moves forward in an authentic way, making sure that we have sufficient and effective training for our frontline officers, as well as all of our members within the organization to understand the impact of equity, inclusion, and human rights and the work as we're moving forward. Having a robust research and evaluation framework is also central, making sure that we're utilizing best practices. We're creating best practices and that we're sharing that with the policing community writ large, again, as many look to us as leaders in this space, particularly as this unit is the first of its kind in Canada. Making sure that we have robust change management and communications framework as well, which means that we're actively engaging in bringing the community as well as our internal members along in the journey with us, making sure that they understand the reason for the change and its importance in our interactions with communities as well as each other. Making sure that we're developing programs, again, utilizing research and evaluation frameworks to make sure that we're utilizing the information in the way that we need to develop programs that, again, help to sustain and further the work around equity, inclusion, and human rights. And another key component of the service and supports that we provide is strategic advice, both to command, to frontline, and other members within the organization from an equity, inclusion, and human rights lens. Here you'll see how all of these pillars actually greatly support the 81 police reform recommendations. From training to community engagement, again, research and evaluation, you can see the key themes from the 81 recommendations are reflected here in how this unit, again, supports the service. What is unique to this as well, Center of Excellence, when we look at Toronto Police, we have an all-of-command approach to enable equity inclusion portfolio across the organization. What we're looking at is an equity leadership approach, which is innovative, because you'll see that every single command member actually has a portfolio that they're leading within the unit. This demonstrates to the service as well as to community the commitment at the highest level of this organization in driving a progressive equity agenda. It's important to also understand who's behind the work, who's in the unit. This is a snapshot of all of the positions currently to date that we have a mix of permanent as well as contract staff within the unit supporting this work. I want to briefly also touch on who's in the unit. It's important to note the great talent in our team. In many instances, we have individuals who have over 2 decades of community development expertise and experience with marginalized communities, including a history of building relationships between the community and police. One member in particular works with the City of Toronto Crisis Response Unit as well. We also have a history of people supporting LGBT communities, developing strategies to mitigate anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism, as well as members who used to formally work with the Solicitor General at the Anti-Racism Directorate, supporting the Anti-Racism Act, as well as the Anti-Racism Data Standards. We also have members who used to work with the OIPRD in mediation and conflict resolution. We have strong expertise in race and socio-demographic research and data analysis. We also have support from a staff sergeant who has worked within TPS for over 20 years. We also have a lawyer who used to work with the New York Human Rights Commission for over a decade. And so again, when we say that it is a team that is stacked with subject matter experts, this is what we're talking about. And now to get into initiatives. We have been providing quarterly updates on the race-based data collection strategy following the race-based data collection policy. And the strategy is built on these key aims and objectives and pillars: training and support, analyzing, collecting, analyzing, and reporting on data, compliance and accountability, as well as the development of action plans. We've heard from community that it is extremely important not only to collect the data, but ensure that we're developing plans on how we intend to eliminate as well as mitigate any disparate outcomes. Our strategy includes partnerships with the Wellesley Institute, as well as collaborations with the Anti-Racism Directorate, the Ministry of Attorney General, Indigenous Justice Division, Information and Privacy Commissioner, as well as the Ontario Human Rights Commission. It also has a comprehensive training curriculum and reinforces that aligns with training that is also seen throughout our Toronto Police College. Here's just a bit of a timeline on the strategy, where you see the modernization plan, the development of the unit, the development of the governance committee for the race-based data collection strategy, when we began to collect race-based data, in particular starting on January 1st, as well as the internal, external consultations, partnerships that we've done, development and delivery of training, and we are moving towards new interactions for January 1st, 2021 and beyond. Our strategy also contains a comprehensive communication strategy, again, internally as well as externally, to ensure that our members are aware of the work that we're doing and the why, which is important and key when it comes to change management, but as well as making sure that we are bringing the public along in our journey, listening to their comments, questions, and any issues and concerns that they may raise, and making sure that we're reflecting that in how we move forward, as well as in our training. Evidence of that is the release of the community engagement report, again, where there will be a press release going out today on that. Training development, again, with the key stakeholders that we engaged, they were able to feed into the development of the training module that we had developed in advance of the beginning of the collection of data, January 1st, 2020. We also connected with subject matter experts. We also engaged unit champions all across the service to make sure that we're listening to our members all throughout the service in case that there are any questions, comments. Again, this is central and key to change management in driving such a large strategy. We've already heard about the community engagement report, again, which is being released today. A lot of the community concerns that we've heard, again, is around the analysis and retention of data. Making sure that we have a robust data collection framework is key to our strategy as well. Making sure that we're having the data privacy protocols in place, again, to ensure the secure management of data. All of this is being done in consultation with the IPC. So that's one of our portfolios. Another that I want to mention is addressing workplace harassment and discrimination, making sure that we are engaging in work that's continuing to create a safe and healthy work environment. In the fall of 2019, we held the first workplace harassment symposium, and just last month, we held the second. The second harassment symposium focused on psychological safety and wellness, and the impact of harassment on mental health. It included participation from Toronto Beyond the Blue and the TPA as well. We also have contracted Deloitte to conduct a comprehensive review of our workplace culture and processes to inform an actionable roadmap. In addition to that, we've been constantly encouraging members to utilize EIHR as a source of support if they have any questions and concerns. Achievements also look at how we're reviewing our policies. The EIHR unit is based in a systems approach, whereby we look at what are the conditions that are holding problems in place. And so that involves policies, that involves practices, it involves the ways in which resources flow, It involves power dynamics. It also involves relationships, connections, and mental models. We at the EIHR unit develop comprehensive strategies and approaches to make sure that we're targeting all of these areas. And so ensuring that we're looking at the policies and programs and procedures from an equity and human rights lens is key to how we move forward. Within that, we're also developing a partnership and co-creating the design of a new modernized intake process with the professional standards unit. And this is really about ensuring that we have a client-centered and trauma-informed approach so that members feel comfortable and supported in coming forward when they have issues, and that we're working internally with all our partners that are involved in any investigations process, mediation process, and HR functions in relation to, again, the creation and maintenance of a safe and healthy work environment. Moving on to the Gender Diversity and Trans Inclusion Project, this is an agreement with the Ontario Human Rights Commission that was developed in 2016 to revise our policies and procedures and training in which assigned sex, gender identity, and gender expression are pertinent, and as well to make recommendations for trans inclusive revisions and development. We have engaged in extensive consultations with gender diverse and trans community service providers and individuals. To date, there is a development of a consultation plan and website. We've conducted in-depth interviews, online surveys. There was a public forum as well that was held, and a full-day community consultation. This is the most extensive engagement with the trans and gender diverse community in TPS history to start the conversation and to help us build relationships. The unit also engages in comprehensive training and targeted equity and inclusion solutions, of which includes the development and delivery of anti-Black racism training for all members, ongoing equity, inclusion, and human rights training for all members, new recruits, newly promoted uniform members, again, to foster understanding of equity inclusion concepts and the impact on their work. Targeted coaching and training, which is key because, again, we have to understand what are the mental models and biases that may be impacting people's decisions and their interactions, whether conscious or unconscious, and how do we uncover that? And sometimes that's hard to do in simple training sessions. So we've developed individual coaching opportunities for individuals to help them work through that. And we also engage in train-the-trainer sessions and capacity building for the college instructors, as well as the unit champions across the service, again, making sure that we are disseminating, spreading, and supporting the service in being able to deliver on its progressive equity mandate. We've also been busy supporting the sector writ large, being a member of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, supporting them in the development of training on systemic racism to distribute to their membership, as well as supporting several police services that have reached out to us. And as I can actually see, this is not an extensive list. I'd like to also add the RCMP to this list, who's also reached out to us with regards to support in dealing with systemic racism. We've also developed a framework to collect race-based and Indigenous identity for committees within the CACP as well. And that is a national framework, actually, that will be rolled out that we're continuing to support. Again, which is key because what is important and what we're hearing nationally is that communities are needing for their voices to be heard in a way that's no longer anecdotal. And the best way for us to understand our interactions, our impact on community is to collect the data, listen to communities, as well as to develop action plans. So we're very proud to support this work on a national level. And again, for example, yesterday in sharing our lessons at public forums, yesterday we participated in the International Association of Chiefs of Police virtual conference to talk about the EIHR unit, again, being the first of its kind in what I'm hearing in North America, as well with best practices. What's key to this as well is that we can't do this alone. And so we are supported by our partnership with the Wellesley Institute. which is a thought leader organization really in dealing with marginalization, socioeconomic conditions. They're an excellent research group and charity organization with deep international expertise. It is headed by President and CEO Dr. Kwame McKenzie. In another picture, you'll see Dr. Kofi Hope, as well as Camille Orridge, who's been providing extensive supports to our unit as well as to the organization. Some of these supports include providing advice and guidance on our race-based data collection strategy, the development of our upcoming equity strategy, providing supports on our constable selection system and promotional process that we're working on, the creation of a racial equity impact assessment, looking at the work that our psychologists do in building their capacity. And central to this, as we talk about an all-of-command leadership approach, what's important is the development of our leaders within the organization. And Wellesley Institute is working with all of command on an individual basis in an executive leadership development program where each command member is provided one-on-one coaching with regards to equity, inclusion, and human rights and what it means to be a change leader in this space. Wrapping up now, some of the challenges include just understanding that supporting this work and is important as the public is looking for us to be a leader in equity and inclusion. And we here at Toronto Police are able to be leaders nationally and internationally. However, it's important to know that as much as the work in this area needs support, so do the people. Most equity work in institutions is done by diverse and marginalized individuals. Equity work requires the redistribution of power through thought, intention, and action. This work often can come with resistance, dealing with microaggressions, dealing with justifying resources needed for changes to happen, which change does not happen overnight, but actually indeed over time. And wellness is a central theme that has to be a top priority for the organization, but as well as for the board in supporting individuals who are working on equity projects within the organization. This is a key central figure in how we need to move forward as well. There are some other challenges with regards to gaps in data systems, as well as competing priorities. However, we continue to work through these issues and challenges as an organization. There are, however, great opportunities through committed leadership to drive organizational institutional change and set direction to reimagine policing with an equity and human rights lens at its core, to redesign data systems that can better serve the service's operational, investigative, and strategic needs through digital transformation efforts, as well as to foster new collaborations and partnerships across different organizations, communities, and jurisdictions to advance equity, as well as to contribute our knowledge base on best practices in equity in policing by publishing a range of knowledge dissemination projects, such as research reports, journal articles, and presenting at relevant conferences. Moving forward, the ongoing implementation and progress tracking of our current initiatives is key for us. The development of, as I mentioned, an equity and inclusion strategy, which is coming, building on continued training for members and particularly supervisors, building on the service's current training through the HRTO's McWilliams case, as well as to implement a series of recommendations, again, coming from the board's police reform report just launched in August 18, 2020. And so that, I think, concludes the presentation on the unit and the work to date, and we're prepared to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive presentations, and it shows a tremendous amount of work by your respective teams. You should all be proud of the work that you do because it's very extensive. Board members, any questions of the presenters? We'll start with item number 15, which is the Toronto Police Service Board Race-Based Data Collection Analysis and Public Reporting Policy Community Engagement Report. Any questions on that specifically for the presenters or for the service? Seeing none, Can I have a motion to receive that report? Councillor Nunziata, seconder. Councillor Ford, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. The next report is the Toronto Police Service Board's Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit Progress Update on the unit's work. Any questions, board members? I just have an overall question, kind of on everything that you've presented today. During all of the consultations, was there anything that totally surprised you? I'll give that to anyone that wants to answer that. Any surprises out of this?
I think I would highlight, and then I'll ask the team to also comment, but I think for me, one of the surprises is the amount of hope that the community still has for what partnership could look like with Toronto Police. And that seemed to sort of, I think, vibrate through a lot of the different types of engagement that we had. There were community organizations that we heard from that said the same thing. We heard a bit of that at our town halls as well. And that's that vote of confidence that we really, as a service, as well as the board, need to continue to build on. If people are saying, we're willing to give you our data and information, but we expect that you're going to respect our voice in the process and listen to us and engage with us and involve us in the process as well as we work together, I think we really need to honor that. But as much as there was, of course, there's criticism, there are challenges that people had that they posed as well as concerns, particularly around how their data is being used, how we're storing and managing their data. But there was a significant amount of hope that made me grateful in doing this work. And I'm going to ask the team if they have any comments on that. And Deputy McLean has a comment on that as well.
I would echo the
Chair. Okay. Sorry.
Hi, I would echo the same sentiment as Sue Lynn. I think the other surprise that we had were that people were still willing to be engaged throughout the entire process. So they wanted the report back to the community and also to be included every step of the way as we went through the process. So I think for that, there was still obviously the hope and the willingness to participate. And definitely, I think a lot of people, once they understood what race-based data was supposed to assist the community with in regards to addressing systemic racism, they're very open, but still wanted to make sure that their information was safeguarded and that it was not used in a negative way.
And Deputy McLean now has some comments.
Yeah, I'm gonna answer it. So Sulin and Roseanne answered the question amazingly from the community perspective. I'd just like to throw a little bit of internal perspective on this. And this did not surprise me, but it certainly made me very proud. It is the reaction of our members and the acceptance of the race-based data collection in terms of them wanting us to collect that data, tell their story, because it'll create a more fulsome description of the context in which they are working. I think you can kind of see today, both with the community engagement report work, as well as the work that the unit is doing and the other projects that we have that are equally important, that we really invested in expertise, and some of that expertise is really coming through in terms of the results that we are reporting to the community today, as well as to the board. I think it's important to remember that all of the work, all of the people that we have brought in, we have not hacked this. We have really invested in both expertise and experience to get these results. And I don't want to make it sound like with the results that we are getting, and these are complex projects that, as Susan mentioned, take time. I don't want it to sound like it's easy, but in a presentation like this, it may look easy. Equity work is very difficult on any given day, and I just want the board and the public to know that the priority for us going forward is to support this work and to support the people who are doing this, because ultimately this work supports our members who are working in our neighborhoods to keep our communities safe. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jeff.
Chairman Hart.
Mr. Morgan, I just have a question. Mr. Morgan?
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for the presentation. And I concur with Deputy McLean. Equity work is never easy, and particularly in this climate with the given challenges, that much more so. I just wanted to maybe, I appreciate the presentation. This is obviously a complex and very challenging endeavor. I know in the last, I think, board meeting, there was brought up some questions around partnership or with the Indigenous community. I'm just want to know if there's any development with that. So that's question one. Question two, just again, given all the challenges, just sort of an understanding around some potential timelines for some of the deliverables. If that has been sort of discussed, and if so, do we have some sort of a path forward for some of those deliverables?
Thank you so much for that question or questions. One, I'll speak to the Indigenous engagement. We are about to launch a position for an Indigenous engagement specialist. We, again, wanting to be respectful of community, have made sure that we're consulting with partners on the development of the actual job posting, as well as the interview process prior to launching, and making sure that our Indigenous partners are included all the way through on this process as well. And so that's in queue, and we expect for that position to be posted within the next month. And that individual will be responsible for the ongoing work of the Indigenous engagement strategy that we're building to make sure that that perspective is weaved through, not just through race-based data collection, but in fact, all of the work that we do through the Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit. So that is coming within the next month. With regards to your other question, considering that this was just a progress update and overview, we really just wanted to provide the board and the public with an understanding of the pillars of the unit, understanding of our approach, again, which is a systems approach, understanding of who the individuals are that's tasked with doing this work, the expertise that we provide, making sure that people understand that through this expertise, we're looking at the best practices and policies. We also want to provide a range of the activities that we're engaged in, so people know that, from workplace harassment, creating a safe work environment, to race-based data collection, all the way through development and delivery of training and review of policies and practices, that this is, and not an exhaustive list actually, but a number of the things that the unit is undertaking. With regards to the timelines, every single one of our projects has timelines. We just did not include that in the presentation. And if that is something that the board would like to see, we're more than happy to provide that. We have work plans. For example, the GDTI initiative actually has timelines that are embedded within the structure itself due to our partnership with the OHRC. And so, again, there's also timelines within the race-based data collection because we're moving through the board's policy, but as well as the anti-racism data standards actually has timelines and expectations for all of the jurisdictions that are highlighted, child welfare, education, as well as justice sectors. They all have timelines in terms of when we're supposed to be collecting data and what it is that they need to see. So all of our work has timelines, again, but given this presentation and the fact that we only had a few minutes, we just wanted to give the breadth and scope, but we have that information available to the board anytime.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to receiving that information and for your next update. So thank you very much to you and your team for the work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Board members, any further questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion to receive item number 16? Motion to receive. Oh, Mayor Tory, did you have a question or comment or wish to speak?
Sorry, yes, that was... Is that okay?
Sorry.
Is that okay?
Yep. Mayor Tory, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on these items because I think they're just so important. And I first of all want to say thank you for the two items, the community engagement and also the update on the human rights and equity group and the action plan, as I call it. I just wanted to say something that I think is obvious and goes without saying, but because I think this is one of the most important initiatives that the board has undertaken since in the time. But like everything else, the importance of it will be directly, will be directly related to the way in which we do it. And I think all of this is very positive, and I think that it looks like it's all heading in very much the right direction. But and I was struck by one of the thought bubbles, and I haven't found the page again, but those little bubbles that are in the presentation that have people's words in them, and it talked about how, nice to consult us, but we really want to be included. And I think the report we have here suggests that is the case. But I think, and look, I'm sure I've been part of exercises over time that have consulted but not included people. So for that, I would, sort of plead guilty with an explanation. But I just think that we have to, first of all, focus on, I think, being very transparent. And it's ironic I say that because what we're talking about here is data that's, has to be handled very carefully. But I think the more transparent we are with respect to, what we're doing and how we're collecting it, and transparency in this case means fully engaging, as suggested, many of the people who are most interested in this and about whom the data is about whom the data is related or from whom the data came. And I think, again, that's what we're intending to do here, is to do that. I think we have to make sure that the whole project, if I can call it that, the whole initiative is founded on respect, is founded on inclusion, and is founded on dialogue and on a continuous basis. And again, big organizations, whether it be the police service or a big company or a big government, start off having all the right thoughts about that. But then what tends to happen, I think, actually, is that the formalization of all that kind of consultation and inclusion, it becomes so formal, it almost becomes like, not worse than not doing it, but it becomes so formalized that it becomes less meaningful. And less of a kind of a real dialogue, and that's why, and a real inclusion. It's kind of like that. That's why that bubble left the impression on me in the presentation that talked about, yes, consult me, fine, but I'd much rather be included. And then finally, again, these are all covered in the presentation, but I really just wanted to emphasize them because I view this, because I was just part of the board. I was one member of the board, but I strongly supported this as something that I think is going to leave a significant, legacy from this board going forward, and it is groundbreaking in Canada, as we know. Finally, is accountability, and I think that we just have to be finding ways other than just sort of being here at our meetings and thinking somebody will wander in with a deputation, that we have to sort of, and again, that's covered too in this report. But I guess really what I'm saying is we have to really sort of walk the talk here, and really focus as a board hard on making sure that we don't just do the things in that kind of routinized way that you can do things and say, yes, we have the quarterly report on so-and-so, but actually, keenly get ourselves involved in including people and in engaging with people and so on, because I just think this is so important. And if we don't do it well, I think the consequences of that will be, not good in the context of all the issues that we're trying to address through our 81 different things. This one is very, very, very important, and it sort of happened before some of the heightened focus on this. So I just wanted to say that, and in so doing, thank the two groups that really, I guess, are all one group in a way, for all the work that was done that got us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just picking up on the mayor's comments, we had a great item earlier today, item number 3, Police Reform Implementation Dashboard. And I think around the issue of being open and transparent, a lot of this work is work that the broader community is interested in. We need to find a way to integrate that to make it transparent in terms of the dashboard. So I think that's a conversation that we can have on a go-forward basis, because you're doing tremendous work, and the more people that know about it, the better. And the more often we get it out there and the more current we are with the information we share, the better. I think the Chief wanted to wrap up and have a couple of comments. Chief, did you have something you want to say on this?
Actually, Chair, I'd just say that your last comment is a very good point, and we'll look to work that into the dashboard. I also want to echo the Mayor's comments about the equity work being very, very important work, and we have a number of deliverables, and we're going to work very diligently to meet those timelines, and it will be a participatory process. So I just want to thank Sue Lynn and Barb and all the committee there and Peter for their work on this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Board members, any final comments on this? Anyone wish to speak? No, I think we've got it covered. Great. Could I have a motion to receive item number 16? Councilor Nunziata, seconder. Ms. Kostakis, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, item 16 is carried. That's our last item on the public agenda. So can I have a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn, Ms. Kostakis, seconded by Mayor Tory. All in favor? This concludes public portion of our. I hear someone speak.
I heard something there.
When do we come back for the other part?
30 minutes from now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.